This is Jason, the #1 player in the world and the biggest player killer to ever exist. A lost kid shows up and Jason goes straight for him just to scare him, but the kid doesn't even flinch, and that throws Jason off. He hits the kid with everything he's got, and the kid dodges every single one of his punches without breaking a sweat. Jason grabs him by the shirt. Now that the kid is standing still, he throws a hard punch right at his face, but Jason gets punched back so hard that even the aliens felt it. The #1 player couldn't believe that this kid just stopped his attack. He tries to throw another punch, but the kid blocks it with the tip of his finger. The kid decides to hit back even harder, and throws a punch so powerful that it sends Jason flying. So far he goes all the way around planet Earth. The #1 player was terrified of this kid. Jason asks himself, who is this kid? Where did he come from? This is Kim Wooju, and we're going back in time to understand how he got like this. Kim is a broke guy, and son of the creator of the biggest game in existence, Another World. His father passed away and left him only an apartment and a mysterious key that Kim had no idea what it was for. One day while watching TV, he hears about a limited edition book that nobody could open. He immediately remembered the key his father left him. Searching through the apartment, he found several of his father's works, and among them was a book just like the one on TV with a golden lock. Kim put the key in the book. A light appears and swallows his entire room. When the light faded, he sees the book is empty.
It's blank.
But a floating virtual system appears, announcing daily missions. The first one, deliver wyvern eggs. Without really understanding, he put on his VR headset and entered the world his father created. Inside the game, a system window appeared, offering rewards. Kim accepted one of them without thinking, and summoned Lucia, the Demon Queen, one of the most powerful characters his father ever wrote. But Lucia is from a different story, and was lost inside this game, asking Kim if he is a god. Since the MC is the son of the creator, he knew everything about his father's works, so he pretends to be a god. Quoting the first word spoken 30,000 years ago, she believes it, and bows to the kid. Suddenly a dragon appears beside him, so he says he can't use God's power, and asks her to take down the monsters. But her powers were sealed in the other world by the heroes, so there's only one option, run, because he actually has no power at all. Lucia can't use her own powers, but she can give power to someone else, so she grants a simple power to the kid. Kim is running while he receives the queen's power, but his very next step makes him vanish so fast, he blasts through the atmosphere and ends up in the galaxy. He panics because he couldn't breathe, and lands back on Earth with his next step. Every time the monster tried to grab him, he vanishes in the same instant, leaving the monster completely confused. The problem is Kim can't control the power, because every time he tries to take a step, he laps the entire world. The dragons get frustrated, and all charge at him at the same time. Since Kim has no control over his steps, he decides to stand still, and when the monsters go to attack, he throws one punch into the air so hard it punches a hole straight through planet Earth. It's Yu Saitama. Every single dragon was evaporated, not even their bones were left. The day went on, and Kim spent the whole day trying to take a single step without ending up on another planet. No matter how hard he tried, he'd take the slowest step possible and already cracked the ground open. Lucia was dying of laughter, which made Kim so mad, he logged out of the game. Thinking in his room, he decided to open another limited edition book. Kim went through his father's books to summon someone stronger, someone capable of defeating Lucia herself. This time he grabbed one of the works, opened the book and ended up in a world of snow. When he accepted the gift, Zero was summoned. The legendary 2-star assassin, a cold, emotionless guy who had already buried more than 3 billion bodies. Using the system inventory, the MC dressed Zero in clothes and a premium scarf, something Zero had never seen for someone raised in the middle of war. Zero agreed to follow Kim but was still at assassin level 2. To face Lucia, he would need at least level 3. Then giant rabbits appeared and attacked both of them. But before Kim could show his strength, the monsters mysteriously vanish. They had actually gone underground where Kim couldn't attack without destroying the planet. Zero got angry because snow fell on his clothes and started crying. In that exact moment, his level shot up to 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, reaching Super Saiyan level. Zero with supreme power used his wire-cutting ability and obliterated the monsters underground, making over 10 trillion cuts in a matter of seconds, leaving Kim with literally no ground to stand on, and horrified to realize she had summoned a demon. The MC logged out of the game, and left Zero alone with nowhere to go. Some giant bats appeared but were taken out easily. Meanwhile, Kim spent hours studying his father's unpublished drafts to learn more about his character. Zero was still waiting for Kim to come back when a group of soldiers arrived and attacked him. The assassin appears behind the enemies, trying to catch them off guard, but in the end he gets hit. During his fall, everything seemed over. When a memory of Kim crossed his mind, he refuses to give up and grabs onto the mountain. The kid is all beaten up and the soldiers keep attacking, but he doesn't give up, hoping to see Kim again. Zero starts climbing the mountain, even while taking hit after hit from the soldiers. When he finally reached the top, he slipped and that should have been the end. But our MC shows up right in time and saves him. The kid can't believe that Kim actually came back to save him. The protagonist throws him into the air, and with his power he destroyed every single soldier with just one attack so powerful that the entire world could see it. Meanwhile, Lucia was watching everything from far away, saying his power is weak, but it still makes a lot of noise. Either way it worked out because she picked up a subordinate, who's actually pretty useful. She was watching all of it through her evil eye, an ability even her father feared. So the moment they arrive, she's going to make a new Demon King army to conquer the other dimension. But then, all of a sudden, an explosion happens, and some unknown guy shows up. The blonde kid says the target is confirmed, and he's going to eliminate her immediately. Man, now she's really screwed. Countless strikes were recorded by the web novel called Mushikin. Its author is the protagonist's father, who's named Andromeda, and because of its world building and insane scale, ground attacks are absolutely forbidden. And obviously that game the protagonist was in wasn't an exception either. Then the ground there starts to recover, and Kim thinks this game's implementation rate is incredible. Plus it's hard to believe a universe like this was running at this level. There'd have to be a lot of monsters for that to happen, and it's not like him who's already become a monster could say anything. Either way, this power just gets in the way. He can't even finish daily quests, which means it's basically just a curse, right? But because of Lucia's mistake, he ended up getting an interesting clue, which means that when the magic summoner dies, she gets dissolved too. To beat her, a head-on fight could be tough, but an assassination might be more doable. In Zero's web novel, around volume 30, he had a 3-star skill that could kill even immortal people. To make it easy to understand, the ultimate skill brings both physical death and brain death, which means Lucia could get hit with that so-called permanent death. But Zero's power is still at 2 stars, and to use that 3-star skill, he's gonna need 1 more, right? Still, he'll solve this problem easily, since he found an official fast growth route in his dad's research. To sum it up, it's gonna be the feeling of rage. In the novel, when Laura was fatally wounded in the final phase, Zero had gone into extreme rage. He got a pretty big level boost, but since he was already awakened, it wasn't that noticeable. And basically, emotions are the key to that kid's level growth. Still, he wants to know how he could ruin his mood, asking if he thinks assassination is a joke, and if he shouldn't be more fired up. So he needs to be more mad at himself, and have the mindset to push even harder to the limit. The kid says if that's the case he just has to smile, but Kim says he has to get angry until his heart explodes. And hearing that, Zero starts crying. Man, this guy's just a kid. Seeing that, Kim wanted to know what went wrong and why it ended up like this, figuring it was when he'd offered a scarf to win his favor. Because of that, the kid's instincts probably went down the drain. Then Kim says that for this assassination, he's gonna have to bet his scarf, and the kid panics right away, and Kim realizes he's heading in the right direction, right? Asking if he understands how serious this is, because it means Lucia is a villain who'd go as far as stealing what isn't hers. Then some really crazy lights start coming out of Zero's body, and now he actually looked furious. So the 3rd star appears on his shoulder, and Kim asks if he's mentally ready now. So they should go face Lucia head on now, man. This dude doesn't look innocent anymore. Kim uses his system to teleport, and finally they're at the place where Lucia is. Looking to the side, Kim says she's in that direction, and then he sees something weird. Damn, the blonde guy was literally wrecking Lucia. Without wasting time, Zero goes after the guy, throwing a combo of hits. The player asks what the hell he was doing, and the protagonist tells him to stop because that's not the target. But looking at the guy, he's surprised, because he was still fine even after those attacks. The smug blonde asks why he's interfering with his work, since he was there to eliminate the disturbing presence based on his reports, wanting to know what the situation is, because this could be seen as an attempt to kill him. Hearing that, the protagonist immediately gets what's going on, figuring that guy thought it was him who attacked him. Then a flashback shows Kim saying that since Zero has low stamina, he has to hit and run fast. Also, he doesn't reveal his true form. And yep, that's exactly what happened. My guy, the blonde, didn't even see Zero attacking. Then Lucia answers the player's question, saying Kim has no other intention except to conquer this world. His appearance doesn't matter because he's her proud demon lord, and hearing that, Kim was like, what is she even talking about? Then she adds that that dude over there even calls himself God. The man asks him to explain better, and Kim says he was just trying to attack that girl. Either way, he'll support him, asking him to defeat the demon queen already. But the blonde says he's not just gonna let him off like that. In the same instant, he rushes at the protagonist, saying he didn't even manage to introduce himself, asking if he knows this game is based on an original work, because in the original there's a limited edition that needs a key. To make it easy to understand, he's the one who unlocked the limited edition with that key, and his name is Jason, and you've probably already heard his name. Kim, realizing this guy is part of a company called Just One, wanted to know if that isn't one of the most famous security companies. And about his name, you've definitely heard of him, right? Basically, he's one of the best rankers in the game. All that while they were making a fortune through missions that were high risk. Then Kim says he doesn't care what he is, and the guy, pissed off, says Kim's been rude from the start, asking if he really didn't flinch even after hearing his name, and Kim thinks of course he's terrified, but this damn system mask won't let him show his real expression. At the same time, Jason says he's gonna beat the protagonist up, while the protagonist wonders if he's really going to attack someone as insignificant as him. And for a life that was just getting by on daily missions, things got really ugly. To make it worse, he can't even use the power Lucia gave him, because if he kills a player he'll end up being hunted by others. Besides, Zero is someone who follows orders really well, and will stay hidden until the second order. Wondering if he's really going to die here and now, but when the guy throws the strike, the protagonist just manages to dodge. Not even he understood what happened, because even his body started to float. The guy, nervous, tells him not to get cocky after dodging just one, and starts throwing a combo of attacks. Incredibly, Kim dodges every hit, and then starts to understand what was happening. All of that was only because of Zero, who was using his threads to make him dodge. The kid was straight up controlling the protagonist like he was a puppet. The only problem is it was making the blonde guy more and more pissed off. Then the guy comes at Kim again, and Kim says he wanted to talk, warning that he's clearly trying to kill him, asking if he's really going to stain his career just to finish off someone like him. But to the blonde guy, this isn't an assassination situation. It's a one-on-one battle. And since he attacked first, he shouldn't have any complaints on that point. He's right. Hearing that, Kim asks if he ends up killing him, there won't be a problem. Jason says of course not, because it's a rule of one-on-one battles. With that, Kim feels relieved, thinking he didn't know there was a one-on-one battle system because he'd only been doing daily missions. And since he doesn't have to worry about anything else, he's gonna start having some fun. With just one punch, Kim tells him to hang on tight, because they're going for a trip through space. Bro, the punch was so insane, you could see the glow from the other side of the planet. But then Jason says that's ridiculous. That strength is really incredible. But even so, it can't do any damage to him. Man, now it's bad. In the middle of that, Kim thinks he didn't know the power Lucia gave him would become useless so soon. Jason asks if he's surprised because his attack didn't work. If that's the case, he should stop acting like he doesn't care. But Kim says he's only like this because of the mask that's sold in the shop. Jason doesn't care though, and the only thing he's going to do is finish him off. Right then, Kim remembers there was a punishment if he lost this battle again, and then the system warns that if he was defeated, his character would be deleted. As long as both sides agree, it's a system that lets players compete against each other, which means that to achieve anything, you always have to pay the price. There's also the option of a draw, but there's no way to negotiate that. Even so, he doesn't have the luxury of creating and leveling up a new character all over again, so he has to find a way to guarantee the win first. Right then, Zero's thread shows up again, and Kim thinks that normally players can't interfere in a one-on-one battle. But Zero was summoned from another dimension, and seems to be some kind of exception. And in other words, he's going to defend using Zero's abilities and deal the damage himself. This time he's going to hold the hit back a bit, but he still wants to know if he'll be able to ignore the damage. But that wasn't the case. The blonde guy went down in a single hit. The guy literally got launched, doing a lap around the planet. Man, this game's power system is way over the top. Jason, not understanding anything, wants to know what happened, asking if he really just did a lap around the Earth. Seeing the situation, Kim says this is already expected from his attacks, since they're not landing the way he wanted. Hearing that, Jason asks if he doesn't know about his abilities, and he even showed up on the game's homepage as a banner because of his ranking. However, Kim says he's not interested in rankings, and the surprise guy wants to know if he really doesn't care at all, even with power like that. Then the guy says he gets it. Now why Kim probably thought that with all that power he could manage somehow. When you're in this position, you can clearly see people's heads, especially those with inferiority complexes like his. Hearing that, the protagonist starts crying on the spot, thinking it was so spot on he couldn't even believe it. Next, Jason walks up to Kim, activating one of his items, asking if he knows what it is because his damage is going to end up being shown as numbers. Looking at the item, Kim says of course he knows, since it's a really expensive premium item. Then Jason tells him to go ahead and hit him, because he'll only feel good when the protagonist's willpower breaks. Kim, without wasting time, throws a punch that cuts through space. However, it did almost no damage to the guy. Kim is surprised he only did 1 damage, and the guy says any kind of hit will only do that much damage. After all, that's one of the abilities he received. That's why he became the most powerful ranker with that skill. First of all, you need to know his HP is 120,000, meaning Kim doesn't have any chance. So Jason starts throwing a combo of hits, but Kim dodges calmly. He keeps dealing 1 damage little by little, and meanwhile, the Demon Queen was watching everything from far away, saying he just has to keep hitting the kid until his life runs out. Zero along with the Demon Queen were cheering for the protagonist, who seeing that from far away, thinks those two shouldn't be getting along, but they're still together. Back to the battle, he thinks it really doesn't matter where he hits, it'll only deal 1 damage. But one advantage is that even if it's a light attack, it'll deal 1 damage. In the middle of the battle, Kim says that in this story, the Volume 2 boss used an armor called Golden Armor. It was an item that automatically regenerated 1 HP every 0.1 seconds, which means he already knows a way to neutralize an ability like that. So our boy calls out to Zero, asking him to change his attack mode. Then the boy breaks his threads into a bunch of pieces, all going at once straight at Jason. The projectiles keep dealing 1 damage, and Kim says it's way too early to be surprised. This technique attacks more than 1,000 times per minute, and in about 10 minutes the match will already be over, so he'd better find a way to deal with all that quickly. Jason says he's got about 10 minutes to think about it, and then he'd like to hear more about this so-called golden armor. Kim says this item was used by the 2nd volume boss in one of the stories by the creator of this game. Thanks to the armor's insanely fast recovery, he could stay at full health even under rapid-fire attacks, conveniently really similar to his infinite health, but they managed to beat him with this ability too. Hearing that, Jason says he understands the situation, and Kim, curious, asks why he's so interested in the golden armor. And the guy says he knows someone who has the ability to create extremely legendary items, and that's why he's not going to lose there by getting rid of those attacks. Saying that the armor Kim was talking about is exactly the one he has right now. Hearing that, of course the protagonist is surprised, wondering if he's saying his father reused a concept from one story in another. If that's the case, he literally plagiarized, right? To be honest, he never read the original work of this game, which was his father's last project, all because he overworked himself because of that project, and thought it was because of him that his father had been killed. But he's still not convinced about his dad recycling concepts. Back to the battle, Jason asks why he's not saying anything. After all, he already said before that the armor he was talking about is with him, asking if he has to show the power directly for him to understand. Then his health starts going up right away, saying that's a special ability of the golden armor, and combined with his ability that only takes 1 damage, he ends up becoming invincible. Asking if he still wants to beat him even after getting that information. Kim watches the situation in silence, and at that very moment the system shows up. Someone had sent him an email and was asking where he is because they've got something to tell him. Seeing that, Kim thinks that attack is honestly a total waste, telling Zero to stop because that match has already been decided. Surprised, Jason asks if he's implying he already tried everything. Kim says yes, and feels it's pointless and inefficient to keep going like this. Seeing that, Lucia smiles, saying that now he's finally heading in the right direction. Right after that, Kim says that just this once he'll end this match with a single hit. Then the projectiles stop, and Jason asks if he's not going to attack him anymore. Kim says that's exactly it, because he thinks multiple attacks on their own don't make sense anymore. Pissed off, Jason asks if he knows they're in a character elimination showdown, and if he thinks he's going to make it easy for him. On the other side, Zero walks up to the Demon Queen, who asks why he's worried, since Kim's spirit still hasn't been broken. Kim in turn says it looks like he misunderstood, because he'd concluded that he's actually the one who won. But unlike him, he's willing to show at least a little mercy, suggesting they should call it a draw now, thinking it's honestly not a bad option, and the pissed off guy charges at the protagonist without wanting to hear anything. Kim thinks he hesitated a bit because it could be a hassle, but it looks like he has no choice but to deal with this. At the same time, he opens the system window, and Jason asks why he's doing that, because he doesn't have time to write a will before he dies. Our hero says he just wanted to check some spam notifications, thinking there must be over 1 million spams piled up over the last 10 years. Either way, he's going to unlock them all at once. Watching everything from far away, to Lucia the battle was already decided, saying that's why she said there was nothing to worry about. In the middle of the fight, Kim thinks Jason's attacks are pretty simple, so he can dodge without Zero's help. Still, he's just one step away from being able to complete his plan. All of a sudden, the protagonist grabs the man's arm, and he asks what he's doing. Kim says it's exactly what he's seeing, and besides that, the spams are about to show up. Anyway, since he'd won the battle, he has to share some information with him. Actually, from the start, he'd been hiding his real face. To make it easy to understand, he started the game after his family fell apart, and then he did this face customization out of anger. Either way, he's going to show him his true self now. Man, I don't understand anything anymore. Where did the protagonist even get that face from? Jason, desperate, turns his face away right away, and Lucia, watching everything from far away, looked super excited, saying that ugly face matches the Demon King perfectly. So, after 30,000 years, she's finally ready to get married. Like what? Just out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Kim thinks he's bought enough time already, and Jason, pissed off, says he's not going to let him die that easily now. Charging at the protagonist with all his strength, he throws a punch, but Kim blocks it easily, saying a bunch of spams are going to arrive soon, so he can't freak out. Then Kim turns on the system notifications, and the guy unbelievably starts taking damage. Kim says the vibration frequency is 40,000 times per second, and with his body taking damage even from light touches, 1 million spams means instant death, calling this technique the Spam Destroyer. With that, Jason starts getting hit by a flood of attacks without being able to do anything, and the wave of emails was so powerful, it caused a huge shockwave across the universe. The event not only awakened a dark egg that would bring a huge disaster to the game, but it also highlighted the existence of the solar system. Wow, this is going way too far, and the Demon Queen, seeing that from far away, says that even if it was a crappy attack, it's still kinda interesting. With that, the guy's HP finally drops to 0, and an explosion happens at that very moment. Kim, relieved, wonders if he won, and looking to the side he realizes that, unbelievably, that golden armor had dropped. And since he's not dumb or anything, he grabs it right away so he can use it, right? But because life isn't easy, it just wasn't his size. A little later, at the school where the main character studies, Lee wanted to know why Kim was ignoring her messages, even though he was just doing daily missions inside his house. At that same moment, someone messages her, and believe it or not, it's Jason. He says he got defeated by some unknown entity. Right then, her friend Lee next to her stands up, saying she can't focus on the game. Changing the subject, she asks if Lee has known Kim since they were kids, so she probably knows where he lives. Man, and would you look at that? This girl really did fall for the main character. To make it worse, she says she's gonna confess today, and I can already tell this won't end well. A little later, that girl was already at where the main character lives, saying she thinks she misunderstood what he said, and Kim says there's no way he'd ever be with her, asking why he would do that. Wow, he didn't have to go that far. Then he says it's not time to joke around, and just shuts the door because he was in the middle of a mission. Hearing that, of course the girl wasn't just going to accept it while grabbing her phone. She says she won't forgive him, calling some Mingy to gather all the guild members. Yeah, now it's about to get bad. A few minutes later, Kim was relieved that girl had left, and without wasting time, he starts logging into VR. But at that exact moment, someone else opens the door, and he's shocked when he sees who it is. It's literally the landlady, pissed as hell, asking when he's going to pay the rent. A little later, Kim had finally gotten into the game, and the Demon Queen says he's late. Changing the subject, she asks if she's a good candidate now to be his future wife. Man, she's still thinking about that. But Kim didn't come there to chat, and he still wants to finish her off. Even if Zero is at the starting stage, they'll still have a chance. After all, when Lucia was summoned to that world, all her powers were already sealed. In other words, she's way weaker now. Either way, after taking her out, this curse on his power will finally be gone. But Zero did the complete opposite, and just brought the main character and Lucia over to his side. Kim of course didn't understand anything, wondering what he was trying to do, figuring it might be his way of trying to get the two of them to understand each other better. Man, this guy's just a kid, and Kim, pissed off, says later he's gonna need full training to become an assassin. But even with all this, it was already part of his calculations. If Zero's attacks didn't work, he'd have to do it himself. He throws a punch so strong it even sends the clouds into space. But unfortunately, that hit did absolutely nothing to the demon. Meanwhile, Zero was watching everything with that innocent look, still thinking they could have peace. Kim stands there wondering if Zero could block this attack, even while being level 1, thinking that his power might be starting to gradually weaken. It's a pretty reasonable guess, because a power that huge can't be maintained for that long, and if that's the case he could even try to take his first step after so long. But since life isn't easy, he was still flying through space. A few minutes later, Kim was back on that planet, and Lucia says those kids he summons with that key of his are kinda interesting. Hearing that, of course the main character is surprised, wondering how she knows those keys even exist. Then the girl points straight ahead, saying the dungeon has been created. Kim, shocked, thinks it's the first time he's seen that, because it's the sign of the Demon King's resurrection. And if this dungeon is the same one Lucia had before, this game is definitely going to end. Next, Lucia says this is only happening because Kim is creating an army of 2 demon lords plus 1 more member. Kim wants to know who she's trying to drag into this, asking who's the demon lord and who's the subordinate. Then she says that since there's a chance she'll be his wife, she needed a bigger title. Seeing the situation, Kim thinks that even if he wanted to stop the dungeon, he can't do absolutely anything, even considering the possibility of quitting the game, since he's totally at his limit. Right after that, Lucia says what's left is to make money off him. After all, dungeons are business opportunities. To keep it simple, dungeons are real lands of opportunity, where you can make a lot of money, right? Kim asks if she has any money, and she says no, but even so, she's got a dungeon, and just by charging an entry fee, her life is going to change instantly. Changing the subject, he asks if it's good to finish this dungeon or not, but Kim tells her to stop talking that nonsense, asking if she thinks he'd be fooled by just that. After all, he's not that easy. But if she's going to give him money, she has to tell him the details, asking if they're starting construction right away, because she changed her mind really fast. And so, unbelievably, the protagonist had become a demon lord in that game. Yeah, I can't really tell if things are going well for him or not. A few minutes later, Kim had already started building the dungeon, and was surprised those weird lines were on the ground. Lucia says that's a skill of her demon eye that can see absolutely everything. Even so, it doesn't stop there. Then a light surrounds the ground, marking out the area. The girl says it's basically like a map, so you just dig where it's marked. But Kim was still pissed about having to dig so much. The kid just can't catch a break. Of course the Demon Queen didn't care, asking if he's ever seen a demon lord work. Since it's only the first floor, he needs to hurry up, because it's a task that takes a lot of effort. Wow, and she still wants to charge other people. So time passes, and the poor guy keeps working like an idiot. To make it worse, Lucia keeps talking in his ear, asking why he's going so slow. The poor guy thinks he's starving, and he's still getting forced labor, so he doesn't even care about anything anymore, and just wants to drop right there and die already. Right then, as usual, a group of players shows up, and that blonde girl from before says Lee told her Kim was doing quests in the wyvern nest. Unbelievably, it was true, and she asks how Kim dared reject her, and now he's gonna regret it. But if he ends up changing his mind, he could think of a better way to settle everything. Right after that, Kim says being in this atmosphere with a bunch of newbies bothering him gives him a really different feeling. Everyone looks at him surprised, and then the protagonist says that feeling is actually excitement. Man, dude's almost losing it. Dungeons are sacred adventure grounds where your life can end by a thread. Basically the Demon King's legacy, and the bigger the danger, the bigger the reward. But unfortunately, the protagonist's group is short on manpower for such a monumental task, and the poor guy, after working so much, is almost going crazy, not believing those newbies really came all the way there. This is basically a life or death kind of life. Man, I'm starting to feel bad for the protagonist, seriously. Then the blonde girl asks if he's not going to be scared even after all that, asking if he wants to go head to head with them, and the winner gets whatever they want. Hearing that, Kim says he's been to hell and back with these fights, and now, to make it worse, they want to fight him 4 against 1. Even so, he wants to know if she's serious about that condition that the winner can take whatever they want. Then even the girls' group gets uneasy about that condition because they wouldn't profit from anything at all. Meanwhile, one of the players wants to know if she didn't say she was going to confess to the protagonist earlier, and there's no way she's doing all this just because she got rejected. Right after that, the blonde girl asks straight up if he's going to join the fight or not. Kim, without wasting time, agrees, but before that he asks if this was the only small group the girl managed to gather, asking where Lee is. But the furious girl says of course she wouldn't be able to drag Lee into something as small as this, and like he thought, Kim probably likes that woman. This story is going in a really weird direction, and then one of the players says to stop stalling, asking if he's going to accept the challenge or not. So Kim accepts, and the girl says that's really bold of him, and it's exactly like the guy she fell for. At the same time, they throw an energy ball that, unbelievably, even the Demon Queen was surprised by that skill. Kim realizes it's a long-range attack, thinking that if he didn't have Zero helping, it'd be a really bad matchup. But even so, there are a few solutions. But unfortunately, he didn't have to do anything, since the girl's aim is trash. Meanwhile, I don't know why, but there was a turtle walking right through the middle of the desert, and at that exact moment, that energy ball ends up hitting it. Kim was just watching, and at the same time the turtle grows like 10 times bigger. Kim, surprised, asks the girl if she's an evolution sorcerer, since that's a pretty uncommon job. She asks if he's only noticing that now, because she's part of an extremely rare class, so he should have taken advantage of it when he confessed. Next, the giant turtle charges at Kim, and he thinks it's a really annoying ability. Still, since it's close-range combat, he can figure out a way to deal with it, since he'd beaten dragons at way higher levels. But right then, Lucia tells him not to kill that monster, and that he should just capture it so he can make it his servant. Those monsters are valuable resources to fill the dungeon, and it's his duty to capture them. Man, it's funny how she just keeps dumping all the work on Kim without doing anything. The kid of course doesn't accept that so easily, because besides having to fight 4 people, he has to worry about capturing a monster. To make it worse, unless he was a pro hunter, he'd have to find a way to tire a monster out until it couldn't move. On top of that, he can't control his power well enough to make it unable to move. But right then, he seems to get an idea, and looking at the players, asks if they're just gonna stand there doing nothing, thinking he could use their attacks to his advantage. Meanwhile, the blonde girl falls more and more in love, and the pissed-off adventurer says that guy was already stressing him out. 2 players rush at Kim, and one of them says he gets why that girl wants to put him in his place. Then Kim blocks both their hits easily, redirecting them toward the turtle. Believe it or not, it was working, and its HP starts dropping little by little. Kim thinks that if it keeps going like this, he might be able to capture the monster, and watching from far away, the blonde can't believe her turtle is being completely useless. Next, the other girl there throws an ice attack, but Kim had seen that coming too. He's surprised that this group has more long-range magic, but it doesn't matter because he's gonna end this quickly, changing the direction of more of those attacks toward the turtle. The kid was just chilling in the middle of the fight, asking if that's all they've got, so now he's starting to get sleepy, since they won't have anything else to surprise him. Hearing that, of course the adventurers wouldn't take it that easily, saying he thought he'd won way too early. Everyone goes at him with full force, but even then it wasn't enough. Our boy just tanked the hits like it was nothing. The kid is so badass he was holding back all their power with one hand, thinking that if he wants to fill the dungeon with monsters, he can't rely on other people's attacks all the time. But if he could summon that idiot, he could even bring back a monster that got turned to dust and make it his servant. Besides, he'd just gotten a key, so he can do something with it, right? Either way, he has to end this mess once and for all. So he fires that combined power towards Zero, who uses his threads to redirect it. Then the poor turtle gets launched into the sky, getting hit by that enchantment. A massive explosion happens, and nobody understood what was going on. Right then, Kim realizes nothing good was coming from that, and suddenly a giant beast appears in the middle of that smoke. The protagonist sees it was Lucia who did that, since she's the only one who could summon something on that scale. But even in the novel she came from, this was a transcendental being known as a disaster, asking if she's gone crazy to summon something like that there. Meanwhile, someone was watching the situation from far away, saying that thing is the god of the East. Xiao Yu. Lee says he went to that place without anyone knowing, because he heard Jason was defeated and that there was a flood of powerful monsters. The one standing up front is the Demon Queen from one of the novels the protagonist's dad wrote, and the other one is from another novel too. To make it worse, even the dungeon had appeared in that damn place. But the craziest part is that the most threatening being there is just the protagonist, who used to be a loser at school, wondering what he's been doing to cause a mess on that scale. Meanwhile, all the players were shocked by that creature, and the blonde girl says there isn't any monster that big in the evolution encyclopedia. The beast keeps scanning around, and right after that says it's been through this before, but for sure it was heading toward its homeland in the east, but ended up going to some other weird place. Still, because of that woman standing in front of it, its path got blocked. If that's the case, then punishment is necessary. The monster charges at the Demon Queen, and with just one attack the whole ground shakes. But the creature is surprised because the protagonist blocked it with just one hand. The Demon Queen just stands there all smug, saying she tried really hard to kill him, but then changed her mind after hearing about his dungeon idea, saying money really moves people a lot more. And yeah, in a way she's right, huh? Then Kim asks if she's crazy for summoning something like that in this game, because it almost destroyed the planet with just that hit. She says this is going to be the first monster put into the dungeon, because if it was just a normal one it wouldn't draw much attention. To make it easy to understand, a unique monster in a dungeon is insanely valuable, so Kim has to find a way to capture it. Hearing that, the protagonist says it's easier said than done, wondering if she even knows what kind of being that is. That thing is a divine beast that Lucia accidentally summoned to the protagonist's village in the novel, and just letting it wander around already destroys an entire country. Even though it's one of the most powerful things in the novel, Lucia still wanted to capture it, which is basically impossible. But in a way the Demon Queen isn't wrong, because this creature really is a one-of-a-kind existence in this game. Nobody knows what exclusive items it might drop, and just thinking about that already looks like an amazing business opportunity. If that's the case, there's no other choice but to try. Man, this guy is driven by money. Then the monster says it really couldn't believe Kim blocked its attack. Meanwhile, the other girl was trying to talk to the monster, asking to talk after this whole mess is over, and for now she just has to follow its orders and attack the protagonist. Hearing that, the divine beast gets furious, saying a mere creature shouldn't dare talk to him. Then it uses a spell that drains all the group's mana. Everyone starts falling in free fall, and Kim, seeing that, says there's a bunch of stuff to deal with after this fight. But even so, he ends up helping them so they won't die so easily. The players fall into the place where Kim was building the dungeon, and they wanted to know what all that was. The blonde girl, pissed off, asks the monster if it wasn't recognizing its master, because it almost killed her. And then the beast is surprised she survived, but of course it's not going to let that happen a second time. Seeing the situation, Kim says if this keeps going the dungeon is going to be destroyed, calling Zero so he can help him. Then the kid uses his threads to throw the protagonist toward that attack, kicking that damn spell up into the sky in a matter of seconds. The beast is surprised he managed to do that, because it even hurt its body. Then it uses that magic to drain all of Kim's mana too. Our boy is shocked that all his energy got drained. The monster asks what it's like to have all your mana taken, but for Kim it doesn't matter since he doesn't use any of it. But the monster thinks Kim is bluffing, because unlike him, who can't do anything without mana, since he's a divine being, he has the blessing of infinite regeneration. But in his head he thinks the protagonist is definitely a threat and needs to be eliminated immediately. Plus he has to take out the main culprit who started this whole situation. Meanwhile, poor Kim was sad because he thought his power would get weakened after his mana hit zero. But it's just one more reason to activate the dungeon, because to weaken his body, he needs that person. Either way, he's gonna end this fight once and for all. And then the beast asks if he forgot it's an immortal being with infinite regeneration. But Kim doesn't care, launching an attack straight at the monster. Everyone was watching that fight, and Lucia says future business is gonna be really promising. At that exact moment, an explosion happens, and the beast is completely defeated. The attack was so strong it looped all the way through space. Bro, I've already said this story's power system is insanely over the top. Right after that, Kim looks like he's in some kind of hallucination, and that beast can't believe it got defeated. Either way, it admits Kim is incredible, but since it's a god, even totally beaten, it can come back to life after 3 years. Man, that beast that was gigantic turned tiny, and Kim, since he's not an idiot, just captures it. Yeah, it was easier than I thought. Going back a few minutes, Kim's attack was so powerful it went around the earth and sped up its rotation, making, believe it or not, 3 years pass in an instant. With that, the game world got completely destabilized, and a bunch of monsters showed up all at once. Where Kim was, it was no different. A ton of dragons appeared out of nowhere. But of course the kid shows up right on time to wipe everyone out, right? Kim, not caring at all, says he wants to finish this already and get back to work, asking if they're still gonna keep fighting. But a few minutes later, life got easier for our boy. He put everyone to work, so as time went by, that damn dungeon was finally finished. Funny thing is, they even put up rules so nobody could come complain later. Meanwhile, Lucia was impressed, admitting that achievement is definitely Kim's. Right after, the blonde girl calls the protagonist over, asking how he dared do that, even after he lost the fight, saying they should have another showdown, but her group didn't look very excited to do that. That idiot had taken down that giant beast in one shot, and obviously they wouldn't stand a chance, right? Which means he was probably hiding his powers from the start. If you want to keep going, do it alone, we're out of here now. And with no other choice, the girl leaves, saying they'll see each other at school. The protagonist says goodbye too, and the shameless guy even asks her to promote the dungeon at school as well. A few minutes later, when her group was leaving, at that exact moment someone unknown shows up, saying those data are so incomprehensible, they're gonna have to remove them. With that, all the memories from the last login were completely erased. All the players forget what they did in that last login, like nothing ever happened. And right after that, that being confronts the protagonist, asking what he was thinking when he did that, assuming he's planning to threaten the peace of this game, because he straight up summoned the Demon King from another dimension. The protagonist plays dumb, and asks if he's a customer, because the dungeon isn't open yet. But the guy just tells him to answer properly, because the crime of causing chaos in the world is extremely serious. To make it easier to understand, she's one of the admins of this game. Hearing that, Kim is surprised, asking if an admin really came even with the dungeon still closed. Then he starts freaking out, thinking the admin came to charge fees so he can make the dungeon. At that exact moment, Zero starts to move, but then the admin tells him to stay still. All that if he still wants to stay alive. Right after, Lucia also tells Zero not to move, because she can see everything with her demonic eye. And she wasn't kidding at that exact moment. His heart was being targeted, and the admin is surprised she can see her manifestation. She says beings close to death are pretty common in hell, but having something like that as a subordinate is on another level. Either way, she used to be a super crybaby kid back then. Wait, what was that line about just now? Right then a flashback shows up, and Lucia says she was a kid who didn't think straight, but she ended up growing up, so Kim asks if she was Lee, and she tries to dodge the conversation, saying she has no connection to that player, plus she just said she's part of management. Kim says her mom took part when her dad turned this game into a web novel, along with the closed beta, and in a way she really is part of management. But the emblem on her mask gives her away because it was the emblem he gave her since she was his favorite character. Changing the subject, he tells her to stop with these little games and help capture some monsters, but the girl keeps pretending, saying she needs his cooperation to eliminate all external elements from the game. But Kim says he can't do that since he's lost a lot, and can't even complete the daily missions because of this curse. Plus his bills keep going up more and more. In that case there's only one way out, which is to bet everything he has. Meanwhile, Lee says her prediction shows a dark future where beings from outside the game will be wiped out. Right after that, Kim says there's no point starting a fight now, and warns her that Lee doesn't stand a chance to the girl. Even so, his strength doesn't matter because he won't even be able to touch her. Her ability is foresight, meaning no kind of strength matters. Next, Kim says he already knows what her ability is, and that's why he was warning her. And even if she has that foresight skill, once he grabs her, it's game over. But the girl says she already told him that's absolutely impossible. At the same time, Kim starts looking through his system inventory and asks why she's doing that, and if she's checking the items that'll drop right after he dies. If she's thinking about offering a tribute, she should forget it, because it won't make a difference. And right then, Kim hands over another emblem, saying he forgot to give it to her on her birthday. The girl gets excited, telling him to hand it over already, and Kim starts playing games, saying items older than 3 years disappear the moment you drop them. And if she doesn't put an end to this whole mess, she knows what he's gonna do, right? All of a sudden, Kim throws the damn item on the ground, and the girl lunges for it to save it. But that was the protagonist's plan, and right after that he grabs the girl, asking if she didn't see the future where he caught her after dropping the emblem. But it doesn't matter anymore, and she should already know where she's gonna get thrown after all this. And a few minutes later, the poor thing was just inside a black hole. A little later, Lee's mask falls off, and the system says he got the title of the one who made the administrator kneel. Then the kid starts comforting the girl, saying her imagination is incredible, and that's why she gets so emotional over her favorite character. But the only thing he wants is for the girl to leave them alone for a while. This game is so huge that anything could happen, and her situation is one of those stories. Anyway, he's thinking about summoning a hero into the game, and the next one will be from Supreme Blood Demon, and from Martial Arts Chronicles. Hearing that, the girl gets kind of interested, asking if he can summon anyone, no matter the genre of the story. Kim says that's exactly it, since Lucia and Zero are from completely different stories and genres. Besides, they still haven't caused any serious kind of problem, even after all these summons. So Lee asks if that means she can also summon her favorite character, because in the story they took too many risks and ended up getting killed. Kim says it might be possible if the summoning timing was precise enough to be before they got killed. Then the girl gets super excited right away at the chance to summon her favorite character. Kim, seeing all that, seems happy, and changing the subject, asks if she wants to join them. A little later, inside a castle, an angry guy asks if there really isn't a problem. The snow mountain just disappeared, and the information company employee also vanished. On top of that, Jason, who was one of the best players, had his character completely erased, and in the middle of all that, the golden armor the guy had made was unfortunately lost. Lee says that news is really bad, but Jason dropped it during the character deletion, so there's no issue in the system. Also, since it's an expensive item, any movement will be detected. Hearing that, the group says they'll also check the black market. Next, the other man says that even so, it's impressive that Jason was defeated, and unless there was a key user, there's no way to lower his defense. It's been 3 years since he last played this game, and even if it was a big incident, there's no source for the rumors. Changing the subject, the white-haired one asks what Lee saw in the future, and she answers that the game and the world of their characters must not become reality, management, and she only support the changes, and that makes the game more fun. But of course, if they don't like the scene, they could reset it. A little later, Lee leaves that place, and the white-haired one says it looks like the administrators are trying to ignore this. The other guy was already out of patience, asking why they don't go over there and beat the protagonist up. The man says he's thinking about sending a tracking team to follow that golden armor. The spiky-haired guy says if that's the case, he'll take the lead and check in person what kind of people they are. A little later, outside the game, Lee was in the protagonist's room, asking if he was ready. Our boy says he was just about to start, since he'd just found the limited edition of the book. And looking around, the girl says everything's the same as years ago, and Kim says nothing's changed since his dad left. The girl gets super excited about those drafts of unpublished novels, but Kim tells her to just focus on what matters. A few minutes later, Lee asks if this is the book he mentioned yesterday, and Kim says it's the only martial arts fantasy novel his dad wrote. The name of this novel is Blood Demon's Hell Record, and it's going to summon the protagonist, who's the Blood Demon. He's also known as the being who took over a martial world where he raised an army of 10 million zombies and fought 9 major sects all by himself. To fill the dungeon, they need the power to create a zombie army, and hearing that, the girl asks if he can control a guy like that. If they give the Blood Demon time like last time, the zombie army will grow fast, throwing the whole game into total chaos. But Kim, grabbing a key, says he calculated the time to suppress this guy, so there's no time to hesitate, right? Without wasting time, he opens the book, and in that same instant, the whole house is wrapped in light. A little later, the scene shifts to the protagonist of that novel, who was wondering if he'd survived. Because of surprise attacks from martial artists, he ended up falling off a cliff. Even so, he was surprised they couldn't finish off an old man who'd been caught off guard. Either way, he's going to wipe out everyone who did that to him. Right then, a little girl shows up asking if he's okay, and says she'll call a doctor right now. And immediately, the guy thinks he just found the only way to heal these internal injuries. Then he raises his hand, apologizing to the child, because to be reborn he needs a vessel to transfer into. So if that's the case, he'll have to borrow her body for a while. A little later, the man opens his eyes, and Lee can't believe he really was summoned. Then Kim says Volume 1 is mainly about the Blood Demon borrowing a young girl's body so he can be reborn. Still, Lee wanted to know if this is really a demon. Kim tells her to watch what she says because the Blood Demon is still inside him. Suddenly, the demon gets furious, saying he's going to kill all of them. But since life isn't easy, his powers were unfortunately pretty weakened. Lee picks the child up in her arms, and the demon thinks he'd forgotten he borrowed this servant's body temporarily. Next, Kim advises the man to control his dantian first, because if he uses martial arts carelessly in this body, his blood vessels will twist up. The guy gets annoyed that a brat like this is lecturing him, but he's still right. His servant has inner power, wondering if he'd forgotten the basics to be able to control it. Either way, he'd already decided what he was going to do. First, he'll deal with the girl who'd mocked her, launching an attack in a matter of seconds. But Lee calmly dodges and even keeps messing with him. He can't believe they predicted his moves because there's never been anyone able to do that. Next, Kim asks if the internal energy management was successful. Then they throw the seed toward the girl, who thinks that even though it was tossed lightly, it was hard to catch, wondering if there are still hidden masters in the martial world he doesn't know about. Right after that, Kim says to now try infusing inner power into the next seed, thinking it's getting dangerous to keep watching the Blood Demon. Little by little, he was adapting to that girl's body. Then the Blood Demon asks why he should follow his orders, but Kim says he'll do whatever he wants, asking who he thinks saved his body in the middle of rebirth, and it's not in the nature of the martial world to look after the body you borrowed for a while. Next, Lee says to just follow orders, and meanwhile, the Blood Demon thinks there are only 2 people in the world who call him a lackey. If it's them, they really would read his moves, and just from tossing that seed it would naturally be pretty powerful. Before, he thought he was fighting the martial world completely on his own, but they'd been watching him the whole time. Then the Blood Demon changes his attitude on the spot, apologizing for greeting them so late. In the middle of that, Kim thinks that now everything is going according to plan. Next, he asks what she was talking about, and whether she's not going to focus on the seed. But at that exact moment, when the girl puts her magic into the seed, it explodes. The protagonist asks if Lee managed to see the future with her ability, and the girl says the blood demon's martial arts start with death. Hearing that, Kim thinks that if that's the case, the monsters that turn to dust could definitely be revived as undead. From now on, this is going to be the business capital, and it's going to completely wipe out the dungeon's servants. The blood demon's magic, in its third form, can make even lifeless seeds sprout and become servants. Its name is Yangshi Necromancy, and it's a terrifying technique that let the blood demon face a million martial artists completely alone. As an original fan of the story, it's exciting to witness a legendary being firsthand, but using a technique like that casually is extremely dangerous, and the responsibility of controlling and managing this lunatic is heavier than he imagines. Lee asks if she wasn't supposed to say that first, but it doesn't make any difference anymore. The two start arguing right there, and the blood demon, watching everything from far away, says that this fight between two lovebirds is the same as always. A little later, in the Goblin Forest, a bunch of monsters rush the protagonist, and he doesn't even defend himself, thinking that Yangshi Necromancy has nothing to do with the sorcerer's spiritual power, and it all depends on how strong the body was before it became undead. Then the blood demon asks the undead how they dared do something like that to their master, but Kim says it doesn't matter, since he only summoned them as transportation anyway. Besides, he'll tell him why he brought him to this forest, so they'll have to keep walking a bit more. With that, the group keeps walking through the forest, and Kim, unbelievably, finds a way to start moving around. Still, it's really slow, but either way they're in goblin territory, asking if they feel any presence. The undead next to them says yes, and judging by the presence, it could be stray goblins or kids. Kim says he nailed it, because they're definitely not human. Those are creatures that, instead of being called goblins, are called imps, and they have devilish faces, but they're still pretty small. Then Kim tells the girl to try to make those monsters her subordinates, and she, pissed off, says they're not the kind she wanted to command, but Kim tells her not to be intimidated by their size, since they all look almost the same anyway. To make it easier to understand, those monsters always follow whoever's stronger than them. Yangshi Necromancy is the ultimate technique for controlling dead people, but he's never controlled a living being before. Hearing that, the girl is surprised, thinking her master's insight is really incredible, assuming her master was planning to train to become a more complete blood demon by controlling living creatures instead of dead ones. Then the girl gets all moved, saying she finally realized the master's true intentions, so she's going to do what he asked, right? A little later, she's already standing in front of those imps, saying the master's teaching methods are as brutal as ever. Anyway, she wanted to know how she's supposed to turn them into her subordinates without killing them. At the same time, she gets an idea and a purple aura starts coming out of her body, thinking that even when Yangshi's army had fewer than 100. Right after mastering the technique, a terrified soldier spread an absurd rumor that the blood demon commanded an army of more than 100,000. Basically, he just scared people, and fear eventually turns into worship. But none of what she wanted happened, and the imp just handed his weapon to her. At that exact moment, the three of them hear a noise, and right after that, a giant orc appears. All of a sudden, it tries to attack the blood demon, but the two goblins there defend her. Then the girl feels inspired, not believing she was feeling affection for simple beasts, mentioning that if the ignorant people of the martial world had learned something like this, a monster like this that plunges the world into chaos would never have been born. Catching the blow calmly, she crushes the weapon, and in that same moment, starts chanting. She climbs onto the monster's head, lining up her strike, and taking it down easily. The two goblins, seeing that, obviously couldn't believe it, and then the blood demon asks how she dares mistake a being like him for one of his lesser relatives. They really have zero sense, but he doesn't have time to finish them off, and before they killed them they should just leave. But the opposite happens, and the two of them lift the girl up. Poor thing couldn't take it anymore with all that hatred, and the protagonist was just watching. She managed to make them become allies, but the mission still isn't over. Right then the group hears a horn, and the goblins start shaking in fear for some reason. Tien thinks his plan almost didn't work out the way he wanted. In the Goblin Forest there's a big battle between ogres and goblins, every full moon, and this time, the battlefield is exactly where the blood demon is headed. Either way, they'll find a way to turn both the ogres and the goblins into dust all at once, and taking advantage of the moment, the blood demon is going to turn all of them into undead, and then his plan will be complete. The dungeon's gonna be packed with monsters, so that's the perfect strategy, right? Right then, a black aura rises into the sky, and Kim realizes it's time to teleport. In that same moment, he goes there thinking, this is the central area of the war between those goblins. It's probably where the monsters are most concentrated, and now he just has to leave the rest to the blood demon. But when he looks over there, something's different, because only the orcs had been defeated, and above them, there was the blood demon. Kim, surprised, wonders how that little guy had taken over all the ogres so quickly. His control of his inner energy still has to be immature, but even so, what kind of ridiculous growth rate is this? The blood demon asks if he came there, and then another goblin shows up holding a crown, putting it on the girl's head, naming her the Goblin Queen. Seeing that, Kim thinks that in the original story, the blood demon accepts his first disciple after borrowing that young woman's body, but it looks like that direction shifted to the goblins instead. Unlike Zero, the blood demon doesn't have a strong sense of loyalty, and for the young Chi skill, what matters is the strength the body had before death. If the girl trains the goblins before they become undead, they could end up way stronger, so it's not such a bad strategy. Right after that, the protagonist says she carried out his orders in an incredible way, meaning from now on he's gonna have to be the Goblin King. In the main novel, when the blood demon possesses the girl's body, he discovers a child with an inborn talent for martial arts, and taking advantage of her unreturned love, he relentlessly trains that damn disciple. Basically, it's that desire from the original work showing up there. And for some reason the goblin army is getting insanely strong. Then the scene shifts to another place, with a man saying he's late, asking if they're from Belonso's tracking team. This guy's name is Kiwi, and he asks if they heard he was going to join the team. Hearing that, the other guy can't believe what Belonso was thinking, making them travel with an idiot like this, telling him to get out of there already, because he's only going to mess up their tracking. Kiwi orders him to show a little respect, asking if he already forgot who kicked him out. But the guy says he's not going to respect someone who only became a ranker because of luck. Then Kiwi says he'll let him experience death one more time. Using one of his skills, he manages to make the guy completely unable to move, starting to go at him with a giant hammer, but the man manages to break the spell. Right then, an explosion happens, but Kiwi couldn't land his hit. At the same time, the guy shows up behind him, saying that once you figure out the ability of these key users, they're way easier to deal with. Right then, Kiwi uses another one of his skills, and a huge lightning bolt falls from the sky. The player manages to dodge, and Kiwi asks if an X-ranker was really that proud of pulling off a bug. But the man says he just used the cancel control skill, and anyone could use it. The two keep arguing there, and a soldier says Belonso said that if the brothers were still messing around, they could leave first. A little later, the scene shifts to another place, and the protagonist had gotten there by teleporting. The blood demon asks what place this is, and Kim says it's called Dungeonipia. Meanwhile, Zero was on the other side of the dungeon, realizing the protagonist had arrived, but there was also a completely different presence there, and to make it worse, our hero was still petting her. On the other side, Kim wonders what he should do, because things got way bigger than he meant them to, and to make it worse, that girl had become the Goblin's queen. The original goal was to just wait for the perfect moment to end that war, then turn the monsters into undead all at once, and place them in the dungeon. The problem now is that girl got attached to the goblins, and instead of becoming undead, they ended up becoming disciples. Obviously it's good that the goblins got strong, but if they don't go to the dungeons, it won't help at all. Meanwhile, Zero was watching that situation from far away, and was already getting pissed off. After the protagonist realizes it was Zero, the blood demon asks who that is over there, asking who she thinks she is to point that killing intent at her. Our boy, seeing that, picks her up, asking if she wasn't gonna say hi. Zero, for her part, doesn't move a single muscle, and look at that, the kid's awakening more stars. In that same instant, the two disappear, and out of nowhere start fighting each other. The blood demon is surprised by Zero's skills, thinking the threads aren't normal, but actually it's pure, intangible IQ. A technique that can be dispelled easily, but mixing direct attacks with pulling back makes it more and more complicated to deal with. Honestly, the technique is innovative and well put together, becoming more accurate and faster as it goes on. To make it worse, her body is fragile, she's already hitting her limit, and basically she's at a big disadvantage, right? But obviously it's still not enough to defeat her, right? You have to remember, she's still the blood demon. In that same instant, an explosion happens, and the two end up in a stalemate on the ground. Looking to the side, the two hear a noise, and in that same instant the demon queen appears. Right after that, Kim appears behind Zero, saying he can now increase his stars on his own. If they keep fighting, they'll just waste energy for no reason, so they need to calm down a bit. But the kid had already calmed down, right? The only thing the boy wanted was affection. Seeing all that, the blood demon realizes everyone is someone her master knows, and if that's the case, she'll ignore this rudeness for now. At the same time, the demon queen puts something in the girl's mouth, and she drops to the ground thinking she'd been poisoned. The protagonist asks what it tasted like, and she says that, surprisingly, it was actually pretty good, asking if she could try it one more time. Kim says he wanted to do that too, but unfortunately it's a paid item. Besides, the internal energy she lost during the battle should have been partially healed, and since she's so curious to know what item it is, he'll tell her, because it's a special item for dungeon exploration. But to make it easy to understand, it's simply just a cookie. Hearing that, the blood demon gets more excited and wants to eat more, and now the girl just got addicted. To make it worse, Zero gets the same way too, and Kim thinks that if it's like this with other people, he could make business go well, and he'll pay all his expenses all at once with this dungeon business. A little later, Kim was already starting the dungeon preparations, saying they need to place the monsters to guard each area before giving them life. First he'll start with the weakest monsters, and for the first guardian, he'll simplify it more. So the monsters appear, and in that same instant, the vegetation starts taking shape in the dungeon. Kim is surprised by this implementation in the game, but either way he has to go to stage 2. After summoning orcs, he says that normally something like lower rank goblins would be suitable, but the problem is that idiot blood demon. Each goblin got so unbelievably strong that he couldn't just place them. However, he racks his brain to position each monster, but luckily he managed to do everything. However, now he has to see which monster is going to the final boss phase, which definitely has to be the strongest one, right? Right after that, the scene changes to another place, with Lee saying the bug that affected 3 years of time in the game was fixed and compensation was provided to the affected users. Then someone else cuts in, asking if this was supposed to be some kind of report, because it looks like they're just stating the results without analyzing the cause, or that woman there looks like the one who charged the protagonist for expenses. Lee says that after the main users showed up, analyzing the cause became absolutely pointless. Then the girl with glasses says it's a rights violation to argue with the prophet's words, and the other woman asks if she isn't being way too understanding just because that one is her daughter. And the glasses girl shuts the other woman up, saying that for now they're going to create some tension between the main users. Anyway, they're expecting those kinds of changes to show up in the game, and on top of that they should fully support the prophet's words. After all, responsibility for those words falls on the people who said them. The discussion keeps going, and Lee thinks his mom is really on edge. Thinking about it, it was right to trust the protagonist from the start, but even so, the future is uncertain. After all, he knows his strengths and weaknesses really well, right? Then the scene changes to someone knocking on the protagonist's campaign, and look who it is. It's the woman from before, coming to collect rent, asking when he's going to pay already, and Kim, hearing that, asks if it's really important. Either way, he just has to forget it, and set up a meeting with a real estate agent to talk about buying the building starting tomorrow. Besides, she shouldn't even be inside the building either, because she's got so much money she could end up buying even the owner. Hearing that, the woman doesn't understand a thing he said, and Kim just shuts the door. Back in the game, the kid thinks he doesn't need to hide his ambitions anymore, plus he's going to set up the item shop too, and getting the display ready cost more than expected, but it'll bring in huge profit later. That way he'll escape poverty and enjoy life to the fullest. Right after that, he opens the system and finally starts the damn dungeon. That very instant, an explosion happens, and that was the beginning of everything. With that, all the dungeons responded together and glowed for a moment. Back to the protagonist. For some reason he puts on a mustache, saying that starting today they'll be busy and won't have time to deal with anyone. Lucia says to call that place the Demon King's Castle, and right after that Kim presses something that throws the two of them somewhere else. The protagonist says that as the dungeon grows, the day will come when it's truly called the Demon King's Castle, so they just need to be a little more patient. So a day passes, and the moment to open the dungeon finally shows up, and the kid seemed pretty excited, thinking a lot of people would come. But when night comes, unfortunately not a single person showed up there to go into the dungeon. He even figures there's nobody, because the wyverns are extinct, and the quests don't show up anymore. To make it worse, he'd bragged to the building owner, wondering if he'd ruined everything. But at that very moment, a player shows up saying that the light he saw this morning means a dungeon is descending. Kim gets all excited thinking it's a customer, saying he can use the shop before going into the dungeon, asking if he'd like some help. Hearing that, King Wee thinks he's just a street vendor, saying he only came to watch and it's nothing special on his end. But at that very moment, a group of players restrains the protagonist, saying it's better not to move if he still wants to stay alive. Even so, Kim thinks they're all customers, and in seconds he throws their weapons into space. After doing that, the shameless guy says not to worry, because the shop exists to replace those things. But the group immediately realizes the gear he had was low quality, and some of it was even free. Still, Kim says they're going to buy, and no matter how many items there are, eventually they'll have to buy his. Especially because a smart merchant like him is going to bankrupt all of them. Hearing that, King Wee kind of gets what's going on, asking if he's the root of all the problems. At that same moment, a sniper shoots his arrows toward the MC, and the other player says they're from an organization where murder is allowed at the same time. Kim grabs the blades with his hands, throwing them into space again. Nobody believes what he just did, and King Wee asks if he was the one who took the golden armor, after taking down Jason. Hearing that, Kim says that golden armor is one of the dungeon rewards, asking if he wants to try, but King Wee tells them to cut the crap and hand over the item already. Meanwhile, Zero had been listening to this mess from underground, and the Demon Queen says to leave it to him this time. Right after that, the scene goes back to the same building as before, and Lee says that honestly, he didn't see that coming. If the golden armor shows up as some kind of dungeon reward, it definitely wouldn't be a good thing. At that moment, the girl's mom shows up, asking if that emblem on his shoulder isn't from her favorite character. Then her mom starts talking in a whisper, saying there are people listening to them, saying there are tons of masterpieces among the protagonist's dad's works, and that's probably why he died from working himself to death. She was the editor in charge back then, and she can't even put into words how much she regrets it. Changing the subject, she wanted to know how his son is doing. Lee says he seems fine, because he sees him sometimes at school, and it looks like he's also logging into the game pretty often. Hearing that, her mom smiles, saying Jane asked that personally, wanting to know if there's any reason management is ignoring this anomaly. Obviously, the prophet skill must have seen something in the future, but still, Jane is a dangerous player. They're probably waiting for an opening, and you can't say that guy doesn't want to take full control of that game. Either way, he can't show any sign of weakness, because it could be one of the openings they're always waiting for. Hearing that, the girl goes quiet, and just thinks for the protagonist to do his best. Kiwi is a really dangerous person, but there are scarier guys in the assassination squad. Back to the battle where the protagonist was. Right then someone raises a hand asking them to wait. After all, that fight might be kind of pointless, saying that every dungeon has its own color and scent. Plus, this dungeon's aura matches that person's aura, and everyone has their own unique color, which makes it even more convincing. To make it easy to understand, they started thinking the protagonist isn't a player, but an NPC you can't hit. Still, one of the soldiers doesn't believe his item got destroyed, since it's a pretty valuable thing, right? And the protagonist, shameless as ever, keeps playing it off, asking if he wants to buy his items. With that, the group seems to have believed Kim is an AI, but still, the fact he said the golden armor is inside the dungeon isn't a lie. Without wasting time, Jarl goes into the dungeon, but one of the soldiers keeps saying he's going to keep an eye on Kim, because he's still really suspicious. However, Kiwi says to stop this mess and just go in already, because he already said that guy is an artificial intelligence. So they pay the fee to enter the dungeon, and right away the money lands in the protagonist's vault. He gets excited about his first profit, and now things are finally starting to go right. A few minutes later, with the group already inside the dungeon, they spot a closed door. Everyone's surprised they reached the boss room so fast, and on top of that, they ran into absolutely no monsters on the way. Right after, the old man says the direction is right, and the golden armor's aura is still beyond that door. And hearing that, Kiwi, without wasting time, kicks the door in, so they can enter. And looking around, everyone's shocked, because there's massive vegetation right in the middle of the dungeon. Watching the situation, one of the players says that outside looks similar to the goblin forest. They even assume it was some kind of illusion, and after throwing a few magic attacks they realize it was kind of like augmented reality, which means it's probably a dungeon with an enormous amount of magical power. Right then, some monsters show up, and Kiwi, using the system to analyze them, realizes they're an unknown race, and to make it worse, it's impossible to preset how strong they are. Right then, more of those little creatures appear, and Kiwi asks which way the golden armor is. After all, he wants to find that item without delay, asking if he can leave these monsters to them. Then the girl goes up front, and one of the soldiers stays back to provide cover. The woman for some reason had a real bloodlust, going all in on the monsters. Back to where the protagonist is talking, he says he'd been hearing a lot of noise from in there. Either way, he has to find a way to tone down all that noise when more customers show up, or it'll end up scaring them off. At the same time, a soldier puts down a bag of money, saying he's going to buy everything in this dungeon. Still, he wanted to have a duel with Kim. The main condition would be having his character deleted. Hearing that, Kim asks if he knows that every merchant in the world risks their life to do business. And a few minutes later, the duel was already over, and Kim completely crushed him. And as a consequence, of course the guy had his character deleted, right? It's not easy for anyone. Heading back to the dungeon, that girl was disappointed, saying she assumed they were unknown enemies and stayed on guard, but their attack power is literally zero. The poor guys are so weak they die with a single touch, and to make it worse, they don't even leave any experience points behind. Anyway, she's gonna rest there, waiting for the whole group. The scene cuts back to outside the dungeon, with the soldier saying he's gonna do one last check before the showdown. Wait, I thought the fight was already over. The soldier asks if the dungeon showing up there, and Jason disappearing are connected to him, but the protagonist didn't even care about that. He was just looking at the gold he'd gotten. Still, the guy's really curious, wanting to know what his real intention is, and Kim says just thinking about it already stresses him out, asking if he doesn't think talking is pointless during a fight. But to the guy, this conversation is really important, asking if he's trying to become one of the powers. But Kim, already with a short fuse, tells him to shut up, telling Zero to kill him. The soldier says he already knew he wouldn't reveal his plan that easily, so he'll have to see for himself what kind of skill he used to take down a ranker like Jason. With that, the guy gets ready to fight, and the protagonist asks what he's doing, and while sitting in the chair, he tells him to come at him, full force. Obviously after that the man would get furious, and after activating all his powers he says he's going all out from the start, so he better be ready. Kim even tries to settle everything just by talking, but the guy doesn't care anymore and charges in. Back underground, Zero still couldn't accept having to just watch everything from far away. Lucia says that even watching is a form of trust, and this isn't the place for them to step in right now. After all, it's a chance for the protagonist to realize his own strength, since he's one of the candidates to be her fiancé. Still, seeing how Zero is acting now, apparently their relationship needs to take a step forward. Back in the dungeon, a giant wyvern has just been defeated by Kiwi. Then another player shows up saying he arrived late, and Kiwi asks if he already took care of all the ogres. The guy says yes, but it took a while because he's not that strong. At the same time, a spell wraps around the dungeon and it goes back to normal. Seeing the situation, the old man realizes the dungeon returns to its original state when the place is cleared. In a way that's not good, because if demons show up, hell itself will manifest. On top of that, a powerful energy is flowing from beyond that door, and this dungeon has something they probably could never defeat. Kiwi asks if it was the energy from the golden armor, but the old man says it's different, and specifically it's the presence of something coming from beyond the door. But the girl doesn't care about the warning, she just has to beat everything that comes her way. And when she looks ahead, she's surprised because there's only a skinny orc. The old man says that monster isn't attacking mindlessly, guessing it's some kind of monster from an evolved species. Anyway, it's a good chance to evaluate the level of one of their players, and that guy's nickname is Silver Demon. In that same moment, a hooded guy charges at the goblin, who dodges the strike easily. Surprised, he wonders if the wind energy distorted his attack. At the same time, the goblin attacks with its weapon, and the guy is convinced, thinking that attack wouldn't work. In that same moment, an explosion happens, and Kiwi asks if they also have power and intelligence. And the old man figures that apparently some being taught this monster how to use its strength. But the Silver Demon has had his training too, and they'll see which of the two is better. But Kiwi doesn't want to hear about that, and the only thing she wanted was the golden armor. The old man says it's just ahead, but it looks like a boss fight, and from there it's a fork in the road too, suggesting they should split up for now and handle each side. Hearing that, Kiwi asks if he's scared just because it's a fight against a boss. But the old man says that's a word he'd forgotten since he left the martial world. He only said that because he felt a strong pull from beyond that door. And the goblin, still fighting the Silver Demon, says that if they go through that door, they're definitely going to be killed. Hearing that, the old man is surprised and asks how a goblin managed to talk. Even so, apparently he still doesn't know his place. At the same time, the old man casts a spell, and the goblin can't move anymore, saying that if he keeps talking without knowing his place, he'll only speed up his own death. Then he asks Kiwi if he has permission to keep pushing forward in the dungeon. Seeing that, the girl is surprised and says it doesn't matter, and she'll personally take the golden armor. Getting close to one of the doors, Kiwi doesn't waste any time and tries to open it. The goblin, seeing that from far away, asks what she's doing since he's the guardian of that room, so that door will only open when she defeats him first. Still, the girl tells him to shut up, and that it'd be smart to watch his words, just like that old man said. After all, there isn't a single door she can't open. Damn, she did all that with just her bare hands. Watching the situation, the goblin realizes that old man went through the other door too, even after he warned him not to. Either way, he's gonna be in trouble later, because he'll have to face the blood demon's brutal training. At that moment, the other player charges at the goblin, asking how he dares worry about someone else while ignoring his opponent. And the monster, pissed off, says that even if he looks like this, he's the strongest goblin in the forest. Back at that glowing door, the old man finally goes through it. Looking around, the guy says that definitely isn't something made by the dungeon. It really looks like the goblin's forest, and after looking ahead, he runs into someone. Seeing it was a human, the old man asks if he happens to be the guide for this dimensional portal. Unlucky for him, that's the blood demon, who asks where this creature came from. On top of that, he just judged him by his size, questioning how ignorant he is. The old man, nervous, says not to provoke his anger, and the girl says he's nothing special. Right then, the old man uses that same ability from before, and the girl asks if he's from the martial world, saying he was just about to try something, and if he's showing this much hostility, he'll be happy to use him as a test subject. Man, I can already tell this won't end well. The scene shifts somewhere else, with this guy Balonzo saying he can feel his group getting close to the golden armor. Then someone asks how he can trust such an important task to them. After all, that group is just the ones who got tossed aside, and what he's doing is no different than putting a broken sword in a sheath. Balonzo says that even if they might look like it, they're definitely not weak, because they're strong enough to hold out against even most key users. Right after that, the scene cuts back inside the dungeon, with the old man pissed off about what the blood demon said. In the same instant, he throws an attack at the girl, who's surprised by that ability, but even so, he underestimated her, and she manages to dodge the attack easily. Watching that, the old man is surprised, and asks if she absorbed his vital chi, thinking that the technique that wipes out martial arts is in fact a martial art itself, so he's going to greet him properly before the fight, since he must be a martial arts enthusiast too, asking if he could request a one-on-one match. Also, he has to point out that he's an 8-year-old genius obsessed with martial arts. Man, no way this guy is only that old. Right after, the blood demon says that before that, he wanted to ask a question. Since he said he came through the Rainbow Arch portal, he probably fought the Red Goblin. If that's the case, he wanted to know how it went, and whether he was a worthy opponent. Then the old man, who I can't believe is 8 years old, says the monster showed a lot of spirit, so he had him fight his disciple. And totally changing the subject, he mentions that he's taller than her, and even if she stood on her tiptoes, she'd still be nowhere near his height. Hearing that, the girl is shocked, and says that means he still hasn't surpassed his student, and that's really disappointing. The old man asks why she's making so many excuses just because she's short, but the girl says that doesn't matter. If he hasn't surpassed his disciple, then obviously she's not going to go easy on him. Since he seems to be a martial artist, there's no choice but to try to get through his test. And at that very moment, a bunch of goblins show up and rush the old man. Then the scene cuts back to the Silver Demon's battle, who apparently had noticed something. Right after he lands his strike, the red goblin backs off, realizing that weapon isn't normal. The monster says his weapon is solidified life key, and an honorable skill granted by his master. One example is that he could materialize it in whatever form he wanted, and watching the situation, the red goblin just lets go of his weapon. The Silver Demon asks if he's going to give up the fight, and the goblin says that life key really is pretty dangerous. After that, a flashback shows the Blood Demon saying there's a limit to someone's internal energy, and that's why it's important to coat the weapon with a thin layer of life key. Also, having survived the hellish training, his life key is probably overflowing like crazy. However, for someone as inexperienced as him, using it at maximum output will speed up his death, and unless it was a dangerous moment, he could use that skill. And back in the present, it's obvious this is the moment the goblin's going to use that damn skill. In that instant, a huge light wraps around his hand, and the Silver Demon is surprised he can manipulate such an insanely powerful key, and without wasting time, the goblin charges at the Silver Demon, and at the same time an explosion happens. A few minutes later, the scene changes to that beast the protagonist had defeated before, saying things are getting really intriguing, and looking at Kiwi, it asks if she happened to come to that place alone. The girl meanwhile is shocked, saying that monster is gigantic, asking if there's one that big in the game, and she's really curious to find out if she'll actually be able to deal with this thing. The beast looks at the girl and says it'll give her a reward for making it there, asking if there's anything she wants to say as her last words, but she just says the beast is talking really arrogantly. Changing the subject, she wanted to know if the monster is really possessing the golden armor. It answers that actually it's the guardian of it, because the great Kim personally entrusted it to him, but of course, right. It really doubts there'll be any need to open that box, and Kiwi says he doesn't need to worry about that. After all, she's one of the highest ranked players who cleared this game, and there isn't a monster she couldn't beat. Man, she's really full of herself, huh? Summoning one of her skills, she says being big just means the target area gets bigger. Either way, she's going to end this soon, aiming her attack at the monster. The girl, all confident, already thought she'd won, and right after that she swings her hammer at the beast. Seeing all that, it's surprised, mentioning she really does have some pretty promising talent. Kiwi says that's kind of obvious. After all, she was a promising athlete even outside the game. And if it weren't for that damn accident, she'd still be an athlete to this day. But in the game, uncontrolled cell growth granted her the great power to compete as a high-level player. Either way, it's still not over, because her abilities have only just started to show themselves. A little later in a flashback from 2 years ago, Izidel says he bought more items with his mom's card again, asking if he can't play in moderation. Meanwhile, there were a bunch of people watching that fight between siblings. His younger brother is a high-level gamer in one of the games made by the protagonist's dad, and his older sister is a promising athlete with potential for the national team. And back to the present, the girl keeps going head-to-head with the beast. She starts using all her buffs, and all confident, says there's no monster she can't beat in this game. And seeing everything the girl was doing, the monster again says she's got a promising future with talent like that. Then Kiwi says that for a monster, he talks like he's the strongest, and maybe he should be really confident in his HP, right? Either way, her hammer has an extra piercing effect that ignores any kind of armor, wanting to know how much damage she could deal him over all this time. But to the beast, all of that is just a joke, asking if she really thinks the attack of a mere human could affect him. But the girl didn't care at all, and says he'll only find out once he gets hit. At that very moment an explosion happens, and the monster thinks that when he looked into that child's eyes, suddenly memories from a long time ago came to his mind. Even though he'd lived for thousands of years, he never truly felt the meaning of existence. Even after fighting the primordial beings for 1,000 years, he still couldn't find that meaning. And even when 4 nations and hundreds of millions of lives were lost, he still didn't find that blessed meaning. Still, he's a primordial being, and basically a divine beast. Right, so obviously a small attack like that isn't gonna do anything to him, right? In the middle of that situation, the girl gets confused when she realizes her electric burst ability was getting kinda unstable. That very instant, the IQ ability breaks, and the monster realizes she was using a time stop skill. But since he's an immortal being, he already lives in a state of suspended time, meaning it's also flawed logic to stop his movements. Changing the subject, he asks if she's a being capable of giving him meaning. After all, she was the one who made it to the end of the dungeon all by herself. But she must not be that being, right? And the only person who could really give him meaning would be the protagonist. After all, that kid turned him to ashes with a single hit, even though he's an immortal being. And now, at this exact moment, he was making him move like a puppet. At the same time, a flashback shows the protagonist asking the beast if his name is Cody, of the Nightmare. The monster is surprised, asking how he knows his name, if nobody ever had a clue. Kim says that name was given to him by a boy with an incurable disease, when he destroyed the 4 great nations, and it was a name given in the hope that he could die quickly. The beast asks how he knows those details, and Kim says it doesn't matter, but either way he's the final boss of this dungeon, and his mission will be to protect that golden armor That's the reward for clearing it completely. Then the scene goes back to the present, with the monster thinking he's the absolute guardian of that treasure, meaning he'd finally been given a meaning for his existence. And all of that is thanks to the protagonist. A few minutes later, outside the dungeon, our boy was still trying to settle the battle, just by talking, but the guy wasn't having it, thinking he definitely won't let his guard down. Besides, his daggers are powerful enough that they won't break that easily. That very instant, the player charges in full force, thinking he'll end this with just one hit. When he was about to land the attack, he uses the teleport skill, striking from the side, but he uses his teleport skill again, and at the same time a bit of sand gets into the protagonist's nose. Dude, I didn't need that information. So the player spots an opening and instantly summons a huge tornado skill. But man, the protagonist sneezes and fires off a blast of power right then and there. With that, the partner gets launched into space, not understanding anything that just happened. He uses his teleport skill again, thinking that guy has an extremely dangerous power. Even so, he got lucky managing to place his teleport point under Kim, and now he's found a perfect opening, right? In that case, the real battle only started now, right? But when he looks to the side, he's already face to face with Lucia and Zero, assuming they might be the Dungeon Master's servants. Then Lucia says he's challenging the order of an absolute being, and she's barely holding herself back, asking if it isn't way too provocative to show up literally, right in front of your enemy. After all, his existence must have some kind of meaning, if he doesn't want to be killed right there and then, ordering him to disappear from there immediately. Meanwhile, at the dungeon entrance, Kim says he needs to be careful not to sneeze from then on. At least he lifted his head a bit so it wouldn't cause any problems later, right? Also, he wanted to know where that customer from earlier went, and in that same instant he teleports there. How curious. He asks if he put the servants down below. Tian wonders if the guy had noticed Lucia and Zero's presence underground, saying they're useless, so there's no need to worry. Hearing that, the player says they seemed unbelievably strong, but to Kim they're just side characters, believe it or not. But obviously our boy doesn't feel that way, because with Zero at full power, the entire map could disappear. Right after that, the guy says he envies them for their incredible power, and thinking a single sneeze could send him into space is really something incredible. Anyway, he'd already made up his mind, because even with that much power he can't ignore a world invaded by scammer key users. So he's gonna steal everything he has. Dude, this story is going way too long. The MC sees that and freezes up, asking if customer support centers also have to deal with that. But since there's a business plan, he's gonna have to find a way to get used to it back in the game. The kid says that even if he's a pervy customer, there's no need to worry, and even if he doesn't hit him, he can just send him flying with a shockwave. The player says he's really confident, but that makes sense with his power. A power that can launch someone into space is pretty insane. But he noticed that whenever he attacks, he always avoids aiming toward the earth. In that case, he's gonna take the chance to attack from below in the middle of all that. Kim thinks that unfortunately he's been exposed. That guy, besides being a pervert, is a smart pervert at the same time. The player manages to grab the MC, then he starts going on this crazy explanation that apparently he used game bugs to his advantage, mentioning that because of insanely powerful people like him, the game lost its order and its fun. Then Kim says that using bugs is also a way of ruining the game, but the guy doesn't care at all. He tries to use one of his bugs when teleporting, but he's shocked when it doesn't work. Our kid, seeing that, says it's obvious it wasn't gonna work on him. The furious player says he worked his ass off to become the owner of a dungeon, but now he's losing to some poor guy like the MC. What is this? Getting insulted for no reason, and hearing that, Kim says that if that's the case, he should look at the money in his account, and unbelievably the kid had a little over 7 billion gold in his account. Of course the man doesn't believe it, thinking it was some kind of cheat, but the MC says you can get all that by doing a ton of quests still. To the guy it's basically impossible, but if it's true then that really must be an amazing business. Meanwhile, Lucia was listening to everything from down below, saying this conversation is heading in a bad direction for her, and calling Zero, she says he did well holding back until now, but there's no need for that anymore, and now he can do whatever he wants, asking him to help the master once and for all. And in that same instant the guy comes out from underground. Looking to the side, Zero notices some players had already left the dungeon, and the girl says it's been a long time since she last saw her boss. And when she looks to the side she sees the guy literally the way he came into the world. Then the scene cuts back to inside the dungeon, that place that looks like the Goblin Forest. That battle between the old man and the blood demon's subordinate was still going on. He says he can't believe a race with so little intelligence was managing to coordinate synchronized attacks. The girl says he's holding on so far, but her subordinate gets stronger every minute, so she wants to know if he'll be able to keep holding on later. But the old man thinks he couldn't hold back his excitement, and wanted to keep fighting for a while longer. Either way, he was still thinking about learning how to tame monsters. In that same instant, he leaps and hits most of the goblins, but the blood demon stopped it, asking if he hadn't actually been aiming at her, so she tells the other goblins to fall back, since she'll train them later. Besides, since the old man held out in the battle for so long, he deserves some kind of reward. The man realizes he can't move his arm, and the girl says she's pretty pissed off now. Suddenly she launches an attack that even changes the old man's physical form, and he thinks that this is literally an energy battle. He keeps resisting, and the girl is surprised he's still able to stay alive. A little later, the man didn't even look human anymore, saying this was a mystical martial arts technique, but he managed to control it. His next fight will probably be his last, so he's going to do everything he's got to defeat her. At the same time, outside the game, a girl says she'd already done everything she had to do around the house, and doesn't have any pending missions. Her life before was very comfortable, but still pretty boring. As expected, her dad went off to work and left the house like that. And if this keeps up, her mom is going to be on his case later. Either way, there's no choice but to tidy up all this mess, right? But while she's cleaning, she finds some books that, by the way, were martial arts books. Time passes, and she keeps reading the book, getting excited with every page. But suddenly her sister shows up saying they're going to have to do another mission. That's how she found out and started learning martial arts. And it's been 2 years since that happened. Wow, I can't believe this old guy is actually a woman. Then the blood demon, surprised, says that if she hadn't trained properly, she definitely would have already been killed after that attack. And the girl, meanwhile, thinks she might have met a real martial arts maniac. Since that day, she trained in a place where people didn't know anything about martial arts. On top of that, she also changed her mana into internal energy, and it wouldn't be wrong to say she lived the life of a true martial artist. That's why she knows the person in front of her is really powerful, and the internal energy that girl has is really different from normal. To make it easy to understand, normal internal energy is less efficient than the mana in this game, because using 10% mana only gets you 30% of the effect. However, there's a reason she converted all her mana into internal energy. After all, after years of training, it's possible to compress it to be dozens or hundreds of times more efficient than regular mana. And right after that, the girl asks the blood demon if she can ask something. No matter how you look at it, she doesn't think her martial arts are more than 60 years old. After all, with less than 60 years, the internal energy particles would be too big to pull off bigger techniques. Hearing that, the blood demon asks what idiot would try to fill a small container with big particles, and that you just need to break them up and then compress them properly. The girl, who I don't know whether to call an old man or not, says a setup like that is impossible without rebirth, and the blood demon says she's already done it, since she even borrowed someone else's body during the rebirth process. Still, even after hearing all that, the old one doesn't think it's possible for this game to have a real rebirth system. However, she has a level of foundation so high it's unbelievable, even seeing it with her own eyes, and even having a technique that runs energy through her veins. Despite more than 180 years of training and control, she still hasn't been able to do the same thing she can. That's because of the rebirth process, so it's an explanation that could at least make some kind of sense. Either way, she has to end this fight quickly, asking the blood demon if she was willing to take her final strike. She can clearly see her internal energy is weakening, little by little, since their hands are locked together, right? Also, the container for her internal energy is apparently way smaller than she thought. Hearing that, the blood demon thinks she was trying to regulate her dantian while trading a few blows, wondering if that old one had noticed. If that's the case, she should have ended the fight right there with that last attack she did before. Right after that, the girl looks down, realizing the other goblins were watching that whole battle. So she says she was almost embarrassing herself in front of all her disciples. Either way, it's obvious she can't do that in front of them, right? At the same time, the scene switches to the battle on the other side, and that goblin had cast that huge spell, aiming it at the silver demon, and in that same instant, an explosion happens. With that, the monster, after taking the hit, was obviously defeated, saying the goblin really is the strongest. Then he feels relieved to be the winner, but still, he got really tired, and as expected, what his master said wasn't a lie. Either way, he can relax, since the mission was completed, but in that same instant, he remembers something, and looking to the side, he remembers that colorful door. However, then he remembers he doesn't need to worry, since we're talking about his master, right? On top of that, the girl who went into that other door also seemed unbelievably strong. His race really likes powerful people, so if that's the case, he should train more to challenge them to a duel. The scene then switches to Kiwi, still going head-to-head with the giant beast. She really thinks she's gonna win. Right after that, the monster says that as expected, besides Kim, nobody could deny the reason for its existence. At the same time, it attacks the girl, and in that same instant, an explosion happens. But Kiwi managed to dodge the hit, saying that with that kind of power, it couldn't defeat her. The beast, however, says that even though she managed to avoid the attack, she barely survived. And hearing that, Kiwi says that actually, all this time, she was the unluckiest one. Then she activates one of her abilities, and takes off her cloak. The beast is horrified by what it saw, and Kiwi says those are the illnesses that had put her life on hold. To make it easy to understand, her Key's ability turns her real-life weakness into strength in the game, so she's going to show him what pain really means in this world. The beast, seeing that, says it's a pathetic ability, and the girl says she wants to know how long he's going to keep up that attitude. She starts showing what each virus does, and she had every possible kind, and the monster says that in the end, that's just the fight of someone who doesn't have much time left. Hearing that, Kiwi mentions that the only reason she's using this ability is just to shut his mouth at that very moment. Her body takes on a metal form, and she says it really is true that she doesn't have much time left. Then the scene cuts to the real world, with the doctors saying they're in a critical situation. Her heart rate keeps dropping, so they think they should take the VR off the girl. But that thing is basically working like a breathing system. Now back in the game, the girl was charging in saying she's going to finish it with a single blow, but obviously to the monster, that's impossible. And the only one who could destroy him is the MC. Even if she got a bit stronger, only her base attack went up. Kiwi says that's true since her attack power went from 850 to 260-26, but the effect of her hammer always boosts her attack power by 1.5x. Besides that, the viruses spread through her body multiply it even more, raising her strength to over 100 million in that instant. Everything around them starts collapsing, and the scene switches to outside the dungeon. The MC swapped bodies with that player from before because of a bug, and was super happy to have a ton of money in the account. Right after that, another girl shows up asking why the leader is dancing like he came into the world, and the man in Kim's body wanted to know how she got out of the dungeon alone, while the MC was dancing. The guy says he's got lots of clothes in his inventory so he can go ahead and get dressed, but our boy says that with 7 billion gold in his account, of course he'd be happy hearing that. Of course the player would get nervous, but since they're in the middle of a fight, he's going to use it to test this power he has now. But the moment he stands up, the poor guy gets launched into space. He has no idea how strong the MC is. He uses his teleport skill and feels relieved to have survived, but it really is insane power, and since he's a control master, he'll definitely get used to it. However, the moment he's about to get up again, he gets launched into space one more time. Meanwhile, Zero was watching all of that from the best seat in the house, and the player keeps getting sent off the planet over and over. A little later he wonders how many times he's already gone to another universe, and how one wrong step or breath could cause his death. And if he didn't have his teleport skill, he definitely would need more than one life to survive. Even so, this power is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. His real-life abilities are worse than his sister's, so he dedicated his life to gaming. After becoming an elite player with several tournament wins, he finally got recognition at home, but then his sister suddenly started playing this game too, with some busted ability that pushed him to the sidelines. But now it's his turn to make a comeback, and he was destined to find that kind of power, and obviously his ambition can't stop now. At the same time that girl from before shows up, saying all of this is great, but he'd better get dressed. Meanwhile, the player from far away says he couldn't stand watching that anymore, asking the girl if she wanted to stop dealing with this guy and join them, but she actually gets nervous, asking what he knows about the man at that very moment. A flashback appears with the girl asking if he really thinks he could be the new leader of Balonzo's group. They always followed Balonzo's orders, but the man says his rank is higher's, and he came there as an official representative. However, to her, a former elite player couldn't be above them. Hearing that, the man says her look is unpleasant, and the girl asks if he expects formal treatment just because he's called the leader. Then the guy says that misunderstandings caused by a look during a mission can raise the danger, and as the leader, he's got absolute authority. After all, the members of this group are supposed to communicate through their looks and they mustn't lie about each other's feelings. So time passed, and they started forming a bond of companionship, helping each other out. And like that, each person's opinion kept changing as time went by. Right. Back to the present, the soldier in the protagonist's body thinks they're talented people worth keeping, but now they're on another team, and not under his command. Even so, he's got a bunch of powerful subordinates on his side, and he's about to give his first order now. Calling Zero, he tells him to deal with that guy in front of him, but not to touch the other people. Hearing that, the kid doesn't waste any time and goes after the protagonist, who realizes Zero was there too, and taking the kid by the hand, he tells him not to be surprised, because what they're doing now is called dancing. To make it easy to understand, it comforts you when you're sad, and makes you even happier when you're already happy. To be honest, he shouldn't be teaching something like that to someone who's supposed to be cold and cruel, but it doesn't matter anymore, since his life has completely changed. Either way, he should enjoy it as much as possible. Meanwhile, Zero kept watching without saying a single word, and believe it or not, the kid just goes along with it. The other girl was watching everything quietly too, and at that exact moment, the player in the protagonist's body teleports. Obviously the girl saw that, realizing that technique is obviously her leader's. The guy pissed off asks Zero if he didn't just hear the order he gave, asking how he dares ignore his order and stay with that guy. Either way, he doesn't need subordinates who don't match his ambitions. Right then, he lands a hit on Zero, and man, that was one hell of an attack, huh? Believe it or not, the poor guy was still standing, and so his stars unfortunately start dropping. The player is surprised he withstood his attack, but that's already what he expects from his subordinate. Seeing that, the girl says hitting your own subordinate is disgusting, but the guy just says she doesn't know anything. His ambition is a road to hell, and if the one by his side isn't up to the task, they're trash too. But she doesn't agree with that, because the more crucial the moment is, the more they should stick together. If you don't trust your comrades, the danger goes up in critical moments, and that's one of the orders of Bolonsko's group. So he's going to achieve absolutely nothing with that rotten look. Hearing that, the player says her leader is definitely proud of her. However, with ambitions big enough to change the world, the weak will only get in his way. About to land a blow on Zero, he tells him to blame himself for disobeying his orders. Right then, an explosion happens, but the guy is surprised he didn't land his hit. At the same time, Kim managed to save Zero. Our boy asks if he's okay, saying Zero is careless as always. Then Zero obviously realizes right away that that was actually the real protagonist. After all, even the way he talked was similar, right? With that, the man, seeing that, asks if Kim can use the teleport skill, and he says that with over 7 billion gold in his account, anyone could. But to the guy, that ability isn't something you could do just because you have money. Then Kim says the teleport skill uses a lot of energy, but now he doesn't need to worry about the electric bill. And pissed off asks how he dares touch the characters his father created. Either way, he's gonna pay him back in the cruelest way possible. And damn, now things worked out for the protagonist. Right after that, our hero asks Zero if he only noticed now that his body changed. Anyway, there's no time to talk about that, since they've got a secret mission. And on the other side, the girl wanted to know why her boss was talking to this kind of guy. And to make it worse, there was this discomfort that was bothering her. Right after that, the player says that place was about to turn into a war zone, so she has to leave or keep her distance. However, she says it doesn't matter, and she'll stay with him even in death. Hearing that, the guy says she's always been like that, and that's why he's always liked her. What is this? A confession out of nowhere. Obviously, the poor girl didn't understand anything, and the player thinks that in his original body he'd never be able to say that. So then he says goodbye to his first love. Surprised, she thinks she might already like someone, but still wanted to know why her heart had sped up. And remembering the discomfort she'd felt before, she even starts to think that person is the one she has in mind. In that same instant, the girl gets thrown into space, saying there are still so many things she wanted to say. But it's already too late, and right after that, the player thinks this should be enough. Either way, now he can control it more precisely, since he confirmed the power works properly. But he wants to know why his attack didn't work when he attacked Zero, and that'll probably be the final step to fully mastering this power. Getting close to the protagonist, he asks why he didn't use the teleport skill from the start. But the kid didn't feel like talking anymore, telling Zero that with his speed it should already be enough, saying they should just end this fight once and for all. But the man is the one who answers his question first. Every time he uses this power, danger always comes as a consequence, and even before switching accounts, the teleport skill was already essential. And hearing that, Kim pissed off says that every time he uses this teleport skill, it costs a lot on the electric bill. But like he said before, since he's got so much money in the account now, he can spend without worrying about the electric bill. Now that he gets it, what he has to do is regret attacking his subordinate and just die. In that same instant, the player shows up behind the protagonist, saying the reason might be ridiculous, but he can see that talent because of the power he has now. And to be honest, he's a terrible player, and this is humiliating the protagonist for no reason. After landing a hit on Kim, he's surprised it didn't work, asking why that happened. Now, then the kid just smiles, throwing a punch at his own body, but the player dodges, saying it looks like this showdown is going to take a lot longer than he thought. Still, even with the teleport skill, obviously he's no match for someone more experienced like her. To sum it up, he added an unnecessary ability just to use the teleport skill. That's why he said his control is bad, and adding these tricks probably causes an overload, making the electric bills get bigger and bigger. But Kim just tells him to shut up and die already, and in that same instant, an attack so powerful it pierced the sky gets launched. At the same time, the scene switches to the blood demon, fighting that old man. The girl in the middle of that situation is surprised she's getting overwhelmed, figuring that man was hiding more of his strength than she thought. The old man says the difference in internal energy is obvious, and now that she's lost the little energy she had left, the victory will definitely be his. An explosion happens, and right after, the blood demon thinks that if she ends up pushing herself more, she'll end up ruining that girl's body, wondering if she's really that pathetic for always looking back. Unlike her master and that woman she thinks is his wife, had broken free from their old forms, becoming even more powerful. Plus, Kim had planned several steps ahead for her, and it was hard to believe they managed to master powers that weird, even after becoming sorcerers. But she still hasn't even managed to get rid of the shell of a blood demon, and to be honest, she's not worthy of facing her master anymore. At the same time, the ground completely cracks apart, and the old man asks if she'd given up the fight. But even so, the goblins watching that whole battle were still rooting for the blood demon to manage to beat him. So the girl's heart fills with determination, getting up once again for battle. Seeing that, the old man is surprised, realizing the girl was using the blood soul injection on her own arm, figuring she probably wanted to get killed and take him with her. But turning things around with just one arm is impossible, telling her to stop struggling and accept her defeat already. But the blood demon says she got rid of her arm just to shorten the distance between the two of them. The old man asks what the point of that is, especially for someone like her, whose blood flow is already shot. Then she says that growth sometimes requires tearing down your own barriers and pushing your own limits. Pissed as hell, the old man says he doesn't need a lesson from a loser, and then she says that people who get drunk on past glory tend to get stuck there forever. In other words, as long as you cling to your old shell, you'll never climb out of rock bottom. The old man asks what she's talking about, and she answers that it's just an old story. Either way, she's going to become a new person, and not the blood demon anymore. And believe it or not, she's going to accept her fate of being the Goblin Queen. Then a flashback shows the girl saying she went through a complete transformation, and if she kept improving, she'd become an even more all-powerful blood demon. You can clearly see her inner energy weakening little by little, since they're holding hands, right? But still, meeting that group of goblins marked a new chapter in her life. To sum it up, she felt a warmth she'd never been able to feel before. Obviously, she wasn't interested in them, and their reverence meant nothing, but in the end, she decided to rule them as their master. However, even adding all that up, it can't compare to the value of the blood demon's name. Even so, after all that, she wonders why her heart started racing after the screams of those insignificant creatures. So, just like her masters, it must be time to throw herself into the middle of the fight. After landing a hit on the old man, an explosion happens, and a few minutes later, the goblins wanted to know what had happened. Even the goblin who had fought the silver demon was there wanting to know what had happened. They see a pile of rubble on the ground, and at that very moment, they're shocked. The girl steps out from the rocks holding the old man, asking if he doesn't know who she is. After all, she's the queen of the goblin forest, so victory is to be expected. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, Kiwi says to finish this, but the beast asks to wait a bit. The girl asks what he means, and the beast immediately tries to land a blow on her, telling her to just go die already. The monster is shocked that its tail got shredded, asking if a power that multiplies by 100 million times isn't unfair. Kiwi says everyone who loses to her says the same thing. They call it unfair strength, or a broken ability without even knowing the story of how she got that power. Then a flashback shows the girl waking up in real life. She asks why she's lying down, and a boy says she was brought there by ambulance. Right then, some doctors show up, surprised that she woke up. Apparently, for some reason, she suddenly got cancer. The cancer cells spread through her whole body and are spreading fast because she's young. So a few hours pass and Kiwi thinks everyone is acting way too dramatic. Probably if she rests a few days, she'll definitely be fine. But apparently it's not like she thinks. Poor thing is even spitting ketchup, right? Still, she stays motivated, saying it's nothing, and maybe, apparently she needs to rest more than she thought. After that, the months kept passing, and nothing got better. The poor girl, totally wrecked in bed, says today was the day of the national selection. She'd worked hard to be able to take part, wondering if she should quit the match. But then someone shows up in the room saying the battle of life is still going. Even if this illness messed up her life, she still has a big chance to keep going. Basically, it was in the protagonist's dad's game because it reflects reality and gives you special powers based on your pain, and as a reward for her life that was fading away, she has to light her final flame. Back in the present, Kiwi says it doesn't matter how you label or mock her power, as long as she's paying the price for those privileges. And if you want to keep complaining, you can do it in hell, because she's not in the mood. Hearing that, the beast asks if her power won't become useless if she ends up destroying her own essence, and given the situation, she figures she doesn't need to hide anything anymore, right? Anyway, she actually did pretty well fighting against her old physical body. In that instant, the beast dematerializes, and Kiwi says she thought it was pretty unrealistic of him to think he'd end everything with just one hit. Right after, the monster in its small form says it has to admit the attack that pierced its old body was impressive, and she definitely surpassed it. Looking at the situation, Kiwi asks what that was, and the monster says, you can basically call it a phase 2. To make it easy to understand, the treasure, the golden armor, is still inside him, so the stage clear condition stays the same. Kiwi says he's acting pretty arrogant for someone who'd turned into almost a worm, asking if he should just kill him already, but the beast says not to underestimate him, because even in this form he's a divine beast, and if those insignificant worms are the source of her power, he'll just crush them and reduce them to nothing. And man, the beast really did pull it off easily. Obviously the girl had no idea what was going on, begging him to stop since the viruses inside her body are spreading. The beast asks if she's surprised, wanting to know if she hasn't already seen the viruses die once before. Then she immediately remembers what happened earlier, saying that's all she has left in the game. If she loses that ability, her life will definitely come to an end, begging him not to take anything else from her. I'm starting to feel bad for her. Then the scene cuts back outside the game, with the doctors saying the patient's condition is getting worse and worse. With tears on her face, Iwi says her real life is already ruined, and taking this from her won't change anything in the end. But the merciless beast keeps removing the viruses anyway, and at that very moment a huge light appears. Cutting back outside the game, the girl instantly opens her eyes and sits up like normal. The doctors obviously can't believe it because she just recovered out of nowhere. Sometimes people wait for miracles that medicine can't explain. Every now and then they even witness those miracles, and even if it was just hope, inside a game a god often answers sincere wishes. In the end, that beast, believe it or not, some kind of god, was just helping Kiwi. Back outside the dungeon, the protagonist had placed some kind of portal at the player's feet. He starts making a bunch of excuses, saying that won't work on him, but then he realizes what the real purpose of it is, wondering where that huge massive energy from Kim had been coming from earlier. The moment he figures it out, he uses his teleport skill, asking if Kim was absorbing his power, but the kid asks what he's talking about, because that power was originally his, and now that he's noticed, he can die already. The two attack each other, and in the same instant, a huge explosion happens. The player thinks that, like he suspected, that skill definitely isn't for defense. Then he raises his hand, using the portal to teleport somewhere else, sending all that magic into space. Watching the situation, the player says that's a bug too, asking if it wasn't called save canceling. Kim says that's exactly it, but almost nobody knows about this specific bug. Surprised, the man thinks that before he didn't need to use that skill because he thought it was useless, but now he finally understands why his power wasn't working, not believing that the natural enemy of this huge power he gained would be his own skill. It's even kind of ironic, and right after that Kim says he'd saved another one of his powers too, telling him to just finish this showdown once and for all. However, the player isn't going to move until he uses that power, and he'll have to be even more careful against someone like him who tries to use other people's power. Hearing that, Kim says he hopes his determination won't waver. Calling for Zero, he thanks him for bringing her from so far away, and seeing that, in the same instant the man is shocked, and the protagonist had captured that girl. She asks what her boss is doing, and he answers that even if he switched bodies, he's still her superior. Also, she should watch where she steps, because if her weight changes even a little, it'll definitely explode. Watching the situation, the player gets furious, asking if that's all he's got, since he's already resorting to taking a hostage. And hearing that, the girl asks if the one in front of her is really her boss, asking if he happens to remember they're part of Balonzo's group, because he shouldn't stay in that body and should go back already. Also, he needs to finish the confession he made earlier. Kim, watching everything from the sidelines, thinks his intuition was right, and those two definitely must like each other. Those two should have been married already, and that means the win is basically yours. Anyway, the plan is to activate this portal in 10 seconds, and when that happens, the person on top is going to turn to dust. So if you use your ability to swap bodies with that girl, you might be able to save her. Kim thinks this trick is pretty cheap, but he's the one who asked for it, since he tried to kill his subordinate too, so this would be the worst possible way to get revenge. And hearing that, the player goes quiet, and unbelievably, says to do whatever you want because it has nothing to do with him anymore. After all, for someone who walks the path of war, having someone to care about is no different than drinking poison. Kim, surprised, wonders if he was joking, and without wasting time starts the damn countdown. The girl meanwhile just watches, asking if he knows Balonzo's group still hasn't been disbanded, but he says that group has to be disbanded, and as her boss he's going to give her his final order, and for the sake of his own dream, he'll sacrifice her without hesitation. Unfortunately, his goal of reaching success without any deaths can't go on, so he hopes she understands. In the middle of that situation, it's obvious the protagonist wasn't understanding anything, wondering if they weren't flirting just a moment ago. To be honest, she has no idea what this body's abilities are, but if she wants to win, she needs to beat him in this psychological battle. The countdown finally reaches the end, and the protagonist, with that idiot face, thinks there's no turning back. The girl, for her part, stays silent and accepts her leader's final order, and from the bottom of her heart, she hopes his ambition would be fulfilled. At that exact moment, the portal explodes, and Kim immediately realizes he's screwed up. His guess was completely wrong, and the guy in front of him was more cruel than he thought. With that, the poor girl gets thrown into space, and the player, walking up to Kim, says he created a hostage situation that made absolutely no sense. Even so, he's probably already spent all the energy he'd saved up. With no other choice, Kim calls for Zero, but the poor guy gets thrown away too, and the player says that like he wanted, he's going to end that confrontation quickly. The two start a teleport fight, and the guy says Kim is way too slow, asking if he hadn't said earlier that his control over his ability is just awful. He grabs our boy from behind, and in that instant, a light surrounds them both. Meanwhile, that girl was still drifting in space, losing HP every second. At that moment, someone shows up saying he made her wait. Apparently this guy is her leader now, thinking he almost made a decision he would have regretted for the rest of his life. Then a flashback shows the girl asking if he wanted her to install a location sharing app inside the game, because that's couple stuff. The guy says it looked like they'd need it for a secret mission, and the poor girl, all embarrassed, just shares her location without thinking. And back in the present, the man says that if he hadn't installed the app back then, he wouldn't have been able to find her like this. With tears on her face, she asks if he changed his body just to find her location, even though he had so many ambitions, but he says he was actually being really stupid. He almost lost her right then, but unfortunately he realized it too late. Then another flashback shows the protagonist asking why he was hugging him, and the guy says it was to swap bodies one more time. After all, that girl's coordinates were still saved in this body, The two start arguing about how they should have done it way earlier, and the guy thinks swapping bodies now means losing the confrontation. To be honest, he'll be giving up the supreme power to fulfill his ambition, and his original account will be deleted, losing absolutely everything. Wondering if he'd still want to go back to level 1 and keep playing. It'll definitely be hard, but for someone who's already lost everything, it doesn't really matter anymore. So that's what happened. And the guy swapped bodies, and back in the present, he says he was planning to start over from the beginning, asking if she wanted to join him. The girl says she would keep following him, and that's how they hit 0 HP. The two get logged out, and the guy was obviously frustrated about it. At least he hadn't let his partner down, but it looks like he's gonna have to start from level 1 again. But realizing he needs to learn more about his abilities is already a positive result. Anyway, your goal hasn't changed, and from now on you're going to find a way to fully master your skill. With that, the battles finally ended, and the protagonist group got a total victory. The scene then cuts to the protagonist, not believing that an account with billions of gold had been stolen. But at that exact moment, the system shows up, and to make things worse, he's going to have to pay for all the dungeon's damages. The poor guy couldn't take it anymore, and right then the blood demon shows up with her soldiers. The girl says she finished her job, and Kim, watching the situation, wonders if it's still too early to give up. Either way, he can't let things fail after building a system and talent like that. All of a sudden, our boy logs out of the game, and back in the real world, he says he's definitely not giving up. Right after that, Kim realizes he got another key, which means he could summon another hero. The choice has to be made even more carefully, because with a 7 billion debt on his back, if he picks the strongest one right now, everything's going to go down the drain. In the worst case, he could spend his whole life regretting his choice forever. Still, even after all this mess, for some reason he's feeling way more determined. So he's going to get through this crisis with the strongest characters he'd created. And there's someone who's obviously perfect for this situation. A genius strategist who succeeded in trade between the human world and the demon world purely through management. And if he can count on that guy, he could definitely solve the dungeon's operations management problems. But before he can finish his train of thought, someone rings the doorbell. Kim wonders who it could be, and after opening the door, he's shocked. The person asks if he scared him, wanting to know what it's like to meet a character you thought could only be summoned in the game, in real life. So Kim right away obviously doesn't believe it, thinking he's even hallucinating. He slams the door in the poor guy's face, and the guy, pissed off, says he can't ring the doorbell again, because his pride as Zenyu's wouldn't allow it. So he's probably the one who made him suffer to save the human kingdom, throwing him into hell. To be more specific, his creator. So things are only getting more interesting, huh? On the day Kim fought Jason, his final move caused a massive shockwave across the whole universe. Eventually the vibration reached the black egg, which according to the game's story should never wake up, but it ended up opening its eyes, and then it sped straight toward Earth. And then it finally arrived at that damn place. After reaching the ocean, that thing comes onto land to eat a fish, and looking up it notices that huge beam of light in the sky. Basically that was the moment the protagonist's dungeon got announced. Right then someone appears behind that thing, and it looked like some kind of maid. She asks if the monster got separated from its group, and asks if it wants to go with her. And that's where this weird relationship between an AI and that monster started. A little later, outside the game, Jason was almost losing it, asking if he hadn't heard wrong. The management team had simply refused to restore his account. The person on the phone says they're standing firm on their decision, and it looks like management is judging it as changes in trends. On top of that, Balanzo's group was looking for that damn golden armor that got lost, so management's decision even makes sense. Still, Jason doesn't want to accept it, because back then he was working on a project for Lee when he got challenged to a character deletion showdown. But Balanzo says that was a job he took on his own. Either way, he has to solve these problems by himself. After hanging up, Jason, furious, throws the phone, saying everyone had used him, wondering how he's going to run the security company without a representative character. Right then, someone shows up, and believe it or not, it was Xenos, saying the atmosphere there really isn't welcoming at all. And looking at Jason, he asks how he's been. The guard cuts him off, saying it's not a place he can enter, and Xeno says he shouldn't touch him like that. And then Jason, seeing who it was, tells them to let him in since it's supporters' visiting hours. Right then, Xenos does some kind of magic, saying it'll be a problem if things are this violent before negotiations even start. After all, at this exact moment they're not in the game, right? At the same time, another guy shows up holding him, and Xenos asks if this is the first time they've met outside the game. The one in front of him is named Jason, and he's the CEO of the security company, just one. And the one on the other side is one of the game operators, and her name is Lee. Right away, once he finds out who she is, Jason gets furious, asking why she didn't restore his account since he'd been so loyal to management. Then she says it's because he didn't follow orders, and instead got into a confrontation with users on his own. Jason asks if she couldn't have foreseen his fight with her prophecy skill, and the girl says she's a student, so sometimes she was unfortunately away from the game. Next, Zeno says it looks like all the main players are there, and since they need each other, their cooperation should work out. Jason needs his account restored, while the other assassin known as Blood needs a paycheck. And besides that, the MMA champion is going to need a satisfying fight. And for Lee, even though she's known for her future-seeing ability that could do anything, what she's most interested in right now is her favorite character named Choi Gangjin. Basically the only revenge novel the protagonist's dad ever wrote, but he wants to know if she really wants to bring that guy into the game, because he'd literally only be stronger than a goblin. If that's the case, her current plan is going to prioritize summoning Choi Gangjin, and since he's the key that'll solve everyone's problem there, he'll start out as the strategist leader. Hearing that, Lee is surprised and asks if he isn't Xenos from one of the protagonist's dad's novels. But what still doesn't add up is that he was literally in real life. The scene then switches to inside the game, and Lucia says he was hiding in there. Her demonic eye sees absolutely everything, but he showed up at the right time since they're going to need him now, right? 2 days ago, Lee was by Kim's dungeon asking when he was finally going to summon him, and if he had any idea how much trouble she'd gone through trying to clean up the mess he caused. And obviously it's not something that can be solved with just a reward like that. Wanting to know if he understands how dangerous creating dungeons is, and if she's going to face that kind of danger, there better be some kind of reward. And Lucia, watching everything from the best seat in the house, wanted to know how that guy had developed the skill of annoying other people so easily. And hearing what Kim told her, Kim knows she obviously wanted to summon her favorite character, a guy with absolutely nothing, but still having incredible talent for fighting. The girl gets super excited, and at the same time Kim raises his hand and throws a punch completely out of nowhere. Then he asks if she can feel the power just from trying to reach his hand. Changing the subject, he says that Zero, with a 5-star technique, could wipe out an entire continent without leaving a single grain of dust. On the other hand, the Blood Demon along with his army will definitely become a threat later in the game. If you still don't get it, just look over there to the side. And meanwhile, there were some goblins training. In this game, these monsters are already born with that kind of strength, asking if Choi Gangjin would really be able to defeat even a single goblin if he were summoned there. After all, he's from the human realm, and obviously isn't a match for the game's fantasy power scale. Anyway, they'll talk again when the dungeon stabilizes, and right now there's no room to summon that guy. And back to the present, Xenos says Kim will never summon Choi Gangjin into the game if it's unnecessary. So if that's the case, there'll need to be a reason to summon him into the real world. Everyone gathered there has a key to creating that need, and today's meeting is about that same collaboration. Hearing that, Lee was still trying to process it, and then the scene switches to the protagonist's school. The kid was almost falling asleep in the middle of class, thinking that in the end he couldn't summon him and ended up dozing off. Anyway, he wanted to know if there's any high school student with a debt of more than 7 billion yen like him. Even if he did a bunch of daily missions, he wouldn't be able to pay that amount, and for now he'll just find a way to get the money. Right after that, he asks the kid down there if anyone had asked him to buy bread. The guy says class hasn't even started yet, and meanwhile some students were watching Kim, and apparently the more they watched him, it seemed like there was something special about him. The blonde girl, on the other hand, thinks she's been nervous ever since that fateful day. She confessed to the main guy but got rejected, and then she ended up joining the game to get revenge. But all her memories of what happened in the game unfortunately disappeared. Meanwhile, the other girl was looking at her phone, wondering why Lee still hadn't shown up since class is about to start. At the same time, someone was walking down the hallway, and after the teacher enters the classroom, he says he's going to introduce the new transfer student. Right then, the student covers the teacher's mouth, saying he'll introduce himself. And believe it or not, it was Xenos, saying they could call him Lee Gino. In the middle of that situation, the kid thinks everyone is paying attention to him, but even so, that idiot of a protagonist dares to think he could ignore him one more time. He made him look like an idiot the first time they met, and even hurt his pride, but this is the perfect moment to make his debut. However, right when he was about to say something, someone else shows up at the door. That was the one the wiki says transferred to this school because of her sports scholarship. The teacher says that, like he said before, there's another transfer student, so you can all sit in your seats. At that moment, all the students recognize the girl. After all, she's a famous ranker in the protagonist's dad's game. Everyone wanted to ask her for an autograph, and Xenos thinks his first public introduction as the main character was a disaster. To be honest, he was familiar with all the information about the school, but a transfer student had completely thrown off his plans. And on top of that, Kim, even in this chaotic situation, doesn't show even a hint of interest. As expected, his very existence is a nuisance, and obviously he's not going to let that slide. Right? A little later, it had gotten dark, and the boy thinks the title of genius strategist feels totally meaningless now. Because of his talent, he even made the gods jealous and was exiled from the divine realm. And in the demon realm, in the face of Lucia's overwhelming power, he was reduced to a mere lackey. Even in the human world, that fateful destiny was trying to repeat itself. Either way, he can't give up since he has a reason he came to this world. He's already set everything up, and he's going to make this plan succeed. He's definitely going to find a way to be the main character. Right at that very moment, that assassin from before shows up saying the mission was completed. but it was really hard for that man to deal with the newbies without killing them. If he just asked to wipe them all out, it would have been a much simpler request. A little later, in some random alley, a boy says he was excited to work with Mr. Sang-wook, thinking that if he makes a good impression on this veteran, maybe he can get a job at the Just One company. Right then, the guy pulls a key out of his pocket, asking if they know what it does. The boy says it's a gift from the protagonist's dad's game that gives you a special ability, and he heard the last one was sold for over 5 million in cash. The man says that's exactly it, and most of the top rankers have abilities from that key, but obviously the skills are random, so it's all or nothing. And now that he'd become one of them, it'll basically be a welcome gift. The two of them get excited, and right after that the man says that to use this key you'll need the serial number, and the number has a total of 6 digits, and every time they sell one of these to a freshman, they'll give them 1 digit of the code, and it's like an initiation test. Hearing that, the red-haired partner asks if he really thinks students are going to buy something worth more than 5 million in cash, but the man doesn't care, and they can just make them pay in installments on their card. After the boy leaves, right then someone else shows up, and the guy realizes that's the Bukijin High School uniform. They seem pretty intimidating, asking what they're doing in Chiwa High School territory. At the same time, that man shows up in the alley, confronting everyone from the high school. The guy with the mohawk asks what the Bukijin High School guy was doing in Chiwa School's hideout. Then the guy, without wasting time, just tells him to hand over all the keys. Obviously nobody was going to accept that so easily, and right away one of the students goes after the guy, and then he throws the poor bastard with just one punch. The mohawk guy orders everyone to rush the guy, who, dropping his phone, takes them all out at once in a matter of seconds. And the guy with the mohawk just keeps watching that one kid finish off all his underlings. He's not just relying on his size, and he's definitely someone who trained the right way. And if that's the case, there's no choice but to make a tactical retreat, right? The dude literally ditched his underlings. And meanwhile, the man watches the situation in silence. But at least he managed to grab the key, and when he picks up the phone he says he managed to secure the item. Oh right, I forgot to mention it. The name of that bro is Zambadis. On the other side, the guy says he'll finish his mission soon and meet up with him. And when he looks to the side, unbelievably, he spots the protagonist. He thinks it's surprising someone would put out a hit on a kid like that. But since it's part of the job, he doesn't get to complain, right? He just has to get it over with. Then he hears a noise next to his car, and at that exact moment the building manager shows up. She tells him to move his car, asking if he doesn't know it's a no parking zone. Not understanding anything, he wonders who this woman is, while looking in the rearview mirror, watching the protagonist. Either way, she should consider herself unlucky, because he's going to take out any witnesses and anyone who gets in his way. He throws a sneak attack to try to kill her, and the woman, unbelievably, manages to dodge the strike. What the hell, is she really that strong? She realizes it was a poison needle, and since she doesn't want to get involved, she's letting it slide this time. Still, she makes sure he remembers one thing, ordering him to never set foot in this area again. The assassin doesn't waste time, and drives off, and a little later it's already night. Zeno says there were a few interruptions, but it's nothing to be surprised about, right? As expected, no matter how carefully you plan, things tend to go wrong when Kim shows up. After all, that's the fate of outsiders like him. Still, since they confirmed the mission failed, they should count that as some kind of success. After all, every plan that got carried out without the protagonist's finger in it worked out. Then the scene cuts back to Kim again, saying he has to find a way to summon Xenos today. But no matter how much he looks, he can't find his web novel, and man, he knows the kid is literally in real life. If he can't get Zeno's help, he's definitely screwed, asking what's the point of being a dungeon master when you've got a mountain of debt. If this keeps up, he won't have a single breakthrough in his life, so he has to find, no matter what, a way to summon Xenos. Then the scene switches to another place, with Xenos holding a book. He says this book was taken from the protagonist's father's library, asking if there were any problems during the retrieval. The assassin says no, and instead the security system was so weak it was actually disappointing. But like the client said, they ran into interference on the level of a covert op. Hearing that, Lee is surprised, saying it's obvious Kim isn't the type of person who'd do that. Xenos says that's because the story's pushback is only starting now, but either way it'll take time to figure out his goal. Still, he'll reveal his intentions tonight, and everyone there will see his dream become reality. So, without wasting time, they should start the game already. A little later, the protagonist inside his school asks if she doesn't need someone to go buy bread, but Kiwi calmly says she doesn't eat snacks. The kid leaves all sad, and the other student says Kim is just weird by nature. And hearing the protagonist's name, the girl is sure she's heard it somewhere. A flashback pops into her head of that earlier battle, thinking the name was probably really similar. So she suggests a game to see who would go buy bread, and it'd be a good chance to get some exercise when she takes a look around the school. And if she ends up losing, she'll buy all the bread he wants. And hearing that, Kim obviously gets super hyped, saying not to underestimate him. A few minutes later, the two of them were literally running down the school hallway, and Kiwi thinks he's really willing to take on a sports scholarship student. But no matter who it is, it's definitely a serious match. So the race goes on, and unbelievably, Kim can actually keep up with her. But after they reach the finish line, obviously Kiwi was the winner. Right, no way an athlete is losing. But then Kim shows up right next to her, saying that looking back during a match means you don't have the determination to win. He walks through the crowd and says she still doesn't have the bread in her hands. Without wasting time, he hands the bread to the lady right there, saying his friend will go pay. In the middle of all that, Kiwi thinks that the will to win was what she was missing, figuring she'd lost her fighting spirit, but either way she agrees to pay for everything for the protagonist. He gets super hyped, saying she's really awesome, but to her it's not that big a deal, you know. And changing the subject, he asks if she knows that famous game that a ton of people are playing. But at that exact moment, Lee shows up to cut the conversation off, saying the track team is having a meeting for the players. A few minutes later, at the track club, that Mohawk guy from earlier apologizes to Jason on the call, saying he'd been seeing some unfamiliar faces. And on top of that, there was one wearing Bukijin High's uniform, asking who it is. Kiwi introduces herself, says she transferred yesterday on a sports scholarship, and right after that Lee says he also brought a friend who can fight. But the Mohawk guy doesn't believe that idiot holding a whole bunch of bread in his hands could actually get into a fight. Unfortunately, all the sports department upperclassmen are in the hospital, and he also got attacked yesterday by a foreigner wearing a Bukijin High uniform. Hearing that, the red-haired dude is also shocked, not believing all those third-year upperclassmen got completely taken out. And the leader says that guy was strong enough to match him, and the current problem is that he stole all the keys. But with the call he just had with Jason, his worries are over, since the stolen items belong to the Just One organization, so they're going to start looking for the key immediately, and they're going to find a chance to take down Bukijin High. To sum it up, at 8 o'clock at Central Karaoke, they're going to crash the Bukijin High guys meeting, telling everyone to get ready because it's going to be the start of taking over that school. A few minutes later, the protagonist's group had already left that place, and he tells him the school has turned into a battlefield. On top of that, the thief Kim was looking for, who stole the Xenos history volume, is at the school. Either way, they're going to need Kim, so they can summon Choi Gang-jin, so they can fight. A little later, Kim asks to have everything that happened cleared up all at once, asking who the thief is that broke into his house and stole the Xenos novel, and Lee answers that it was the Bukjin High gang. The guy's codename is Blood, and it's really easy for him to break into an empty house since he's a top-level assassin on a secret mission. Hearing that, the MC wants to know if they're sure they're talking about a high school student, and if he's also the one who stole the keys. Lee says it's true that whoever did it is part of Bukjin High, but it was someone else, and he wrecked that place using nothing but brute force. The jacked guy's name is Zambidus, and he's a former MMA champion from over 5 years ago. Kim asks if that's the case, wasn't he the champion back in middle school? So all of this is really suspicious. Let's say that story is true. Then he wants to know how she knows all of this in such detail. On top of that, the only person who knew he had a limited edition book at his house was her. All of that lines up for her to have been the reason all of this happened. Hearing that, the girl says he might be right, but if that's the case then they just need to summon Choi Gang-jin right now. The scene then cuts to inside the game, with Kim saying they're going to summon him in that place still. She seems kind of weird, and the girl, all nervous, says it's the summoning of her favorite character either way. The MC still doesn't know how they're going to manage to summon him into the real world. Right after that, Lee says he can feel his presence disappearing from the game, which means there's a chance he's being moved to somewhere that isn't specifically inside the game at that exact moment. Lucia shows up saying she was against this summoning because they're basically calling in a useless person, but the MC just ignores her and starts the summoning right away. The silhouette of someone appears, and Kim asks if it's really possible to summon a game character into real life with this technology. Turns out this technology was the one to blame for making over 7 million people become homeless. It's a skill that burns a lot of electricity, so obviously he doesn't really feel like using it, but because of this mess there's no other choice. All of a sudden Kim uses his teleport skill, telling Choi to pay attention to his words from now on. The two of them are going to switch bodies, and the kid hearing that obviously didn't understand anything. A few minutes later the scene cuts to outside the game, and Lee was really happy for summoning his favorite character into the real world. Then Kim stands up, asking what she's wearing on her head, because in a fight it's a huge disadvantage to have that kind of weight on your head. At the same time, Lee wonders where Choi Gang-jin is, and the protagonist says it's him, and on top of that he's really hungry. Then the girl kind of gets what's going on, saying she never wished for Choi to end up in Kim's body. The scene then cuts to Xenos, happy because he finally got rid of Kim. Now there are only side characters left, and even the main character role was empty too. Protagonists get privileges in a web novel, asking what's more threatening than anything to side characters like them. Either way, it means that now, finally, they're gonna have a chance. But to Jason, all of that is stupid, asking if he's going crazy. Then Xenos says he doesn't expect any understanding from secondary characters like them, and they just have to go ahead and do what they were gonna do. Mentioning that no matter how detailed you plan, you can still end up getting ignored. And even when you show up as a transfer student, the main character's drama could steal your moment. Besides, they They could even make an assassin fail their mission. Kim inherited the main character's bloodline and covered up the real culprit with a side character called Choi Gang-jin. To sum it up, the time for the showdown is getting close, and Jason, hearing all that, thinks he's gonna have to quit as soon as his account gets restored. The scene then cuts to the protagonist's school, with the kid asking if Bukujin School and Shiwa are gonna face off tonight. Then the guy who took the protagonist's body, named Angi-wook, asks his friend if he still likes fighting. He answers that even if he's just the school's bread delivery guy, he still really likes brawling. At the same time, Iti asks if Kim doesn't sit in front of him, because he heard that kid fights well. But the kid says he doesn't know much about the protagonist, and Angi-wook says that guy seems really annoying. After all, the two of them had quit a game because of a guy with a similar name to that. But since the world's so big, it's kind of impossible that guy would be that person. Besides, Lee would have said something right away if he was on his friends list. Then in that exact moment, they realize they hadn't checked that, and without wasting time they go check it right away, right? So they end up finding out that this Kim is exactly the one who got their accounts wrecked. And without wasting time, the two of them leave to go confront the protagonist. A few minutes later, the scene changes to Zenos, saying they need to make sure Kim pulls off that technique successfully. Using his teleport technique, he's gonna find a way to swap Choi Gang-jin's body with his. And as soon as that swap happens, she just has to log out of the game. And as you can see, that'll bring her main goal compared to the others. But back in the present, the nervous girl says that isn't achieving her goal. After all, the person she really wanted isn't in front of her, right? A little later, Choi Gang-jin is looking in the mirror at the body he'll have to get used to. Either way, the reason he was summoned must be because of that fight he'd heard about. So it's kinda interesting, asking if it's a war between schools and universities that's about to happen, and they probably need him to win. Right after that, Lee says it's a risky fight, because him using the protagonist's body might not go well. But the kid immediately says he disagrees, because that body is way better than he thought, man. And wow, Kim's actually jacked. Believe it or not, he's got a low body fat percentage, which means his stamina should be good too. Seeing that, the girl is surprised by the protagonist's physique, and right after, Choi says he needs to fill his stomach first. Changing the subject, he notices it's already 3 o'clock, asking if the attack she mentioned was gonna happen at 8. So if that's the case, they've got some time to kill too, right? The kid suddenly lunges at the girl, and she asks if he's always been like that. But the only thing he wanted was to grab the phone, asking if she knows any escape routes or something. But then she says the whole building is a karaoke place, and the structure is basically just like a regular building. On top of that, there'll be a bunch of Bukujin High kids, and knowing the layout won't matter, since it's gonna be a massive fight right at the entrance. Still, for the kid to just walk into the hallway like that all at once doesn't seem like a good strategy. Totally out of nowhere, he says her voice is really pretty, asking if she sings well too. I mean, they should just go sing a few songs since they're gonna fight either way. They should get there early and just wait. And the girl, seeing that, immediately gets all excited, thinking that wink is basically Choi Gang-jin's signature move. And when he always smiles like that, it means he's got some innovative strategy. Even so, she can't believe she's about to see his skills in real time. A few minutes later, the scene cuts to that damn karaoke place, and some students were wondering if this was really okay. Some students are still in the hospital, and they're over here throwing a party, and the bald guy says there's nothing they can do because some foreigner basically took over the whole school. Plus, he even heard the guy took out some students from Choi's school, and that dude is seriously on another level. Either way, I won't have any choice but to swallow my pride and congratulate him. Meanwhile, Kiwi's little group was watching everything from far away, saying that place is usually their gang's hideout. Right then, someone shows up asking if the kid hadn't said he was gonna make a character later. That one's Seung-hee, and she asks what he was doing there. Since that day, he hasn't logged into the game even once, and now he's with another girl, asking if he forgot he's using a location sharing app. Without wasting time, Angi-wook grabs the girl, saying he's hiding because the protagonist said he was gonna come there. Then she remembers it was that guy who acted like an idiot in her boss's body. Obviously, she's never gonna forgive that guy. And right then, Choi Gang-jin shows up, asking if they can move out of the way. I mean, that place seems really good for watching from a distance. Lee was watching the whole situation from far away, and then one of the students recognizes the protagonist. Angi-wook, furious, says they've met, asking if he forgot him, and the kid meanwhile says the protagonist seems like the kind of person who makes a lot of enemies. The kid asks him to hand over the item he'd lost, and Choi Gang-jin says he doesn't know what he's talking about. But he picked the wrong person to mess with. If you grab someone by the collar, that means the other person can automatically do the same thing. Right then, Angi-wook tries to land a kick on Choi Gang-jin, who dodges easily. At the same time, Seung-hee throws her bag in the kid's face, telling him not to do anything else. Choi Gang-jin just catches the bag, saying they work pretty well together. Angi-wook says he better be ready for a fight for deleting that character. But right then, Choi Gang-jin ends up dropping one of those perfumes, and the kid, without thinking, tries to catch it, since it was Seung-hee's. Right. He manages to grab the item, and right then the high school group notices the commotion. But one of the students says, Central Street is always noisy, so there's no need to worry about it. The Shawa school guy, meanwhile, was watching everything from far away, saying this feels like the calm before the storm. Thinking that's the protagonist, he says it's impressive, and even with all the problems, he'd been controlling the situation the whole time. To be honest, he was worried reckless moves before the war could ruin everything. But it looks like the fight in the end is going to be pretty interesting. And hearing that, Choi Gang-jin says he's got a pretty sharp eye for reading the flow of battle. Right after that, Ahn Ji-wook asks if he thinks this fight is over, and Choi Gang-jin can't believe he was planning to keep going, saying he'd figured out his weakness, asking if he'd be able to protect the girl 24 hours a day, and if he keeps this up, he'll exploit that weakness until he finally breaks. And unless he was ready to kill him right here and now, he shouldn't start an unnecessary fight. After all, to him, every fight is a battle for survival. He's always had this habit of noticing even the smallest things, which means he even figured out what he likes. The moment you mess with him, you'll destroy everything you value most. And hearing that, Shung-hee, not wanting to hear anything else, just says to finish him off already, once and for all. But Kiwi tries to stop that fight, since it was something that happened in the game. Right after that, Choi Gang-jin, looking to the side, asks if Kiwi also has a debt to settle with him. Kiwi then asks if he's planning to take part in that fight they're gonna have against the high school. But Choi says he was planning to act alone, wanting to know if she's offering to join in. Kiwi says that if he ends up needing her help, she'll start getting involved. Obviously the other two weren't agreeing with that, because if something goes wrong, her life could be over. But she didn't care at all, saying that if Kiwi needed muscle, she'd just answer. Man, she has no idea that here he's not the protagonist. Hearing that, the kid is surprised, saying that that karaoke room is no different from the enemy's den, and he was planning to push in alone, straight to the heart of it all. And she'll definitely regret it bitterly if she keeps offering help like that. But she says she's always known who he was from the start, and she was just interested. A flashback pops into her head, with that beast from before saying that all of this is only thanks to the protagonist. And she thinks that if those words ever become true, she'll have to find a way to pay that debt back. That's why she wasn't willing to take no for an answer from Choi, Gang and Jin, right? So the kid ends up accepting, saying she'll be on her own if she gets dragged into his fight. But she says she's been walking the road to hell for a while now, so she won't mind that. Right after that, the other student says the attack was set for 8 o'clock, asking why they're attacking earlier. On top of that, he heard the third-year seniors and the Just One Company security squad teamed up over there. And hearing that, Choi says he seems to have a good eye for reading the situation, and he feels like he might need that insight someday. There's also the fact he admires those two who stay fearless even under threats, asking if it wouldn't be better to join forces now that they've come this far. He can only show the truth through action, so he'll do it by taking over Bukajin High. Ahn Ji-wook, pissed off, says of course he's not going to accept that, and right after that Shung-gi says that actually taking that offer won't be bad. After all, that's the Kim who beat him in the game. He has the power he wants and is strong enough to send her flying into space with just a single hit. And now that they've lost Balonzo's help, they can prove their worth there so they can make him a great ally for them. Somehow that guy reminds him of his group, because they'll do anything to win. Changing the subject, she says she came to see him today to hand over that bandana she made, inspired by his hair in the game. Wearing that, he'll definitely be more determined, and without wasting time, Ahn Ji-wook grabs that bandana. He agrees to join Choi Gang-jin's group, saying that if he fails, he won't forgive him. The other student too, surprisingly, says he'll join, and if he gets to witness a real fight that changes this bad situation, he'd like to contribute. Even if it's with his limited intelligence, and Choi Gang-jin says that if that's the case, he came to the right place. After all, he'll show him what a real fighting spirit is, mentioning that this world is really full of fun people. Either way, they're gonna end this once and for all, right? The scene then cuts to Zenos, realizing there are only 3 hours left until the fateful moment, asking Jason to keep monitoring the whole situation, who says that the Bukjin school group are heading to Central Karaoke right now to celebrate their dominance over the school. The Shiwa school group is also fully prepared, and the agents are disguised in school uniforms, so taking them down should be pretty simple. Right after that, the guard hands the phone to the Mohawk guy, saying the boss is calling him, and Jason on the call says his losses really are pretty significant. If this operation fails, he should know he'll be completely responsible for everything. The Mohawk guy thanks him for everything he'd done, and then Jason hangs up, asking if all of this is enough already. Janos thanks him for all his work, and Jason says he has just one question, wondering if, with the ex-MMA champ together with the killer, the win isn't already guaranteed. He asks why they're sending their agents to Shiwa school. Zenos replies, it's because Choi Gang-jin isn't a normal opponent, he's completely unpredictable. That's why they're adding security personnel to boost their strength and remove any room for unexpected developments. Basically, all of this is just about making sure, mentioning that the higher the difficulty and the more variety, the stronger the hero's narrative becomes. And to stop a side character from acting like a protagonist, he's strongly backing Choi Gang-jin, asking if there's any problem with that. Hearing that, Jason thinks that Lunatic is talking about being the protagonist again, and that kind of logic only makes fights escalate. There's no way a fight involving assassins and fighters stays contained, and if this incident blows up, their company's image is definitely going to be ruined. At the same time, Xenos calls Lee, asking him to provide a report on Choi Gang-jin's current situation. He says Choi is entering the central karaoke room earlier than expected, and they're saying he's in an extremely dangerous situation right now. A few allies joined him on the way, but it definitely won't be enough to survive in enemy territory. Hearing that, Xenos instantly gets pissed off, saying that's completely impossible. The protagonist's narrative absolutely has to be cut off, ordering everyone to move up all at once and be sent to Shiwa school immediately. This is no different from an MC's journey where he overcomes a bunch of obstacles and gradually gains allies, becoming a hero in the process. In that case, they need to adapt by acting accordingly, so he goes there too. The scene shifts somewhere else, and the assassin with the codename Blood says he's heading out first. The others can stick to the plan and go to the central karaoke. So the guy leaves, and then the other one says it looks like it'll really just be the two of them back at the karaoke. Someone asks if some kind of party is going on, since they're blocking the entrance like that, asking if they could just let them through already. But the students obviously weren't going to, telling them to get lost already because there's going to be a high school event. Choi asks if they can't see his uniform after all. They're from the same school. Then right away another student whispers in the bald guy's ear and he's shocked, realizing that girl is the famous Kiwi, asking if she shouldn't be in the hospital, and she says she ended up getting discharged. Right after that, Choi tells the student that from now on, the two of them will be the assault team. With their small numbers and lack of physical strength, the only thing they can do is take control of the vibe, so they use that spirit to push straight into the heart of the enemy lines. Right after, he puts his hand on Kiwi's shoulder, and pissed off tells them to let them through already. A little later, everyone manages to get in, and the boy calling over there asks if the boss's room was on the 50th floor, but the girl, changing the subject on the call completely out of nowhere, asks if they couldn't just stop this fight. Honestly, it's not a good time for them, and as a fan she can't watch them fight while they're holding a ticking time bomb. But Choi says it's fine, and hanging up tells the group the goal is to get into the boss's room. Either way, if there's any obstacle in the hallways, he wants to leave the rest to them. Hearing that, Angie Wook asks if that strategy is possible, because if someone goes out, they'll definitely have to face a huge number of people. Kiwi even offers to do it instead of the boy, but Choi says she's actually on the assault team, meaning Angie Wook is the most suitable guy to do all that. And with that bandana he's wearing now, he definitely won't be taken down that easily, right? And everyone, without wasting time, gets off the elevator all at once. Then Choi passes by some students, leaving the rest to his group. Choi even takes out the two who were up front, and the student watching all that wonders if that's really a technique you could use in a real fight. Out of nowhere, the kid pops up like a ninja, saying he'll leave the rest to the two of them. The high school students were wondering who this guy is, and Choi, not caring at all, says they'll have to step back unless they want to be killed. The guy keeps walking past everyone, and the other kid thinks he thought that spirit thing was just an illusion because it couldn't be seen. He also believed that only physical strength could dominate the atmosphere, but now Kim was carving a path with nothing but sheer evil spirit. He knows that guy isn't even Kim. He really is an impressive person, and obviously he's gonna follow behind him, right? A few minutes later, some high school students were inside the karaoke, and at that exact moment someone opens the door. They don't recognize the boy's face and ask how he got in there. Then Choi says that from now on he's taking control of that room, and none of them are walking out of there on their own feet. Right away the fight starts, and meanwhile, outside the karaoke, it starts to rain. At the same time, that killer from earlier shows up too, asking if there were any more visitors. The guy next to him says it was like 3 or 4 people, and it looks like they were invited, but there were some unfamiliar faces. Without wasting time, the killer goes into the building and ends up running into someone. The girl asks where such a handsome guy is going in such a hurry, and at the same time the guy knocks her out, thinking that this is a toxin that could paralyze even an elephant in an instant, meaning nobody could stop him now, right? But then, unbelievably, she was still awake, grabbing the guy's foot, saying that her boss also threw himself into the battle, risking his own life. A little before all that chaos, Zeno says he was on his way to the building too. Besides that, they have to make sure the key kid is safe in the VIP room, on the 50th floor. The killer says he understood everything, while thinking it was a really stupid request. Lately, his boss had been giving him literally pointless missions. The first mission was to grab a book from some regular guy's house, and it was easier than robbing a supermarket. He even almost felt guilty about having to assassinate a kid who didn't seem like anything special. Obviously there was interference, but a variable like that in espionage wasn't surprising at all. In fact, the difficulty level goes up with the assassination orders, but that doesn't matter, and as long as he meets the requirements and gets paid, that's enough. All of that if he can keep his little sister smiling. But today he was surprised that that girl managed to withstand the neurotoxin, and for the first time he thought that this specific mission wasn't going to be as easy as he'd assumed. Right after that, the girl apologizes to her boss, and finally passing out tells him to take care of the rest. The killer just stares at that, but either way he continues his mission, getting into the elevator. He reports that the entry was a success, and a little after the elevator doors open, Choi Gang-jin's group shows up. Looking at the situation, the guy thinks everyone there is still alive, and there's definitely no real professional in that group. Either way, the mission comes first, and there's no need to deal with them one by one. In that instant, he uses a device to release a gas and starts to leave. Seeing that, Kiwi asks if Seung-hee wasn't watching the entrance earlier. If that's the case, they need to try to contact her right away, or they'll go down there and check for themselves. Angiewook says they should keep guarding the passage, but the girl says they already did their part, and she can handle the rest too. After all, besides Choi, there's another martial arts maniac there too. With no other choice, the boy leaves, saying that if anything happens, they need to get in touch, and he'll just find Seung-hee and come right back. Meanwhile, Kiwi thinks that earlier attack was coordinated, but he dodged it in a few seconds, meaning it's not someone they should take on no matter what. If another person like that shows up, he can't guarantee anything, but he'll at least make sure the escape route is completely secure. At the same time, one student even tries to get up, but obviously that wasn't going to happen, right? Thinking that until they defeat that monster, he'll control this space as much as possible. Back to the killer, he'd finally reached the VIP room. Surprised that the protagonist was there, he says that guy looks really dangerous, and things are getting tense. Looking around, the killer realizes everyone is still alive, wanting to know where the key kid is, and all of them were literally right next to the protagonist. At that exact moment, the other student lifts the table, and the killer just smashes it with a kick. Choi appears behind him trying to land an attack, and the killer dodges and counters with a knife, but the kid manages to avoid it too, and the student is surprised, realizing that knife is a karambit. Unbelievably, Choi was managing to hold on even at a disadvantage. Also, those guys are moving like real pros. Out of all the fight videos you've ever seen, their quality is on that same level, and none of them are falling behind. Watching the situation, the killer is shocked, wondering if he's really going toe-to-toe with an amateur who's still unarmed. Then he suddenly takes a kick to the face and hits the ground right away. Choi, though, had also been hurt, and the killer takes advantage of it and grabs his knife again. He spins like a Beyblade, catching the protagonist's foot, about to slice it. But then, right at that moment, he remembers his sister, and the scene cuts to her. The little girl was waiting for her brother to come home, and meanwhile, some projectiles were falling from the sky. And at that exact moment, a huge explosion happens. 5 minutes earlier, Choi had taken out all those students in just a matter of seconds. It was an unbelievably fast scene, and that kind of thinking is hard to wrap your head around. Right after that, the boy asks Choi if he's okay, and he answers that it's nothing, but he wants to know what exactly happened. Surprised, the boy asks if he doesn't remember what he just did, thinking those symptoms are often seen in videos about side effects. It's like a syndrome a lot of boxers get after taking a serious buildup of damage to the head. And now, in that same fight against an opponent using a karambit, it had made him lose his rhythm. It's definitely something you really can't predict. A little later, Choi finally got out of that building, saying everything was fine, but Lee immediately realizes that kid really wasn't okay. After all, she's his biggest fan, and she even knows everything about his past life. As Choi Kang-jin, the strongest fox in Gyeongsang. The scene then cuts to a part of that damn novel with a boy, saying that even though he had a guest, unbelievably, he went there alone just to get beaten up in enemy territory. He probably meant to stir up conflict between them, with a few tricks, but they already know his whole plan thanks to the spies they planted. Still, it's crazy that he held out against their ambush for more than an hour. Meanwhile, the boy thinks his previous life ended miserably, and he should have at least said goodbye to his wife and kids. And even though he reincarnated, the accumulated damage in his head kept giving him headaches even after he was reborn. And eventually that damn pain made his past memories come flooding back. When they came back, he immediately went looking for the family he'd left behind, and ended up finding out they were all murdered. Apparently it was done by people who thought they might try to avenge him later. Then their descendants became gang leaders, continuing to do whatever they wanted wherever they went. From then on, whenever that pain showed up, he tried to suppress it, turning it into a kind of revenge. And his main target was this guy named Kang Do-hun, who would become the protagonist of this story by rising to the top. Seeing the people who tormented him get completely crushed by the very person they bullied was his way of making the most of his limited time. So to sum it up, she knows everything about him, asking how much time has passed since Do-hun reached the top, and he answers that it's been exactly a week since that happened. Also, he wanted to know why she was asking so much about that fateful day, asking if the gap between the headaches has anything to do with how much time he has left. Then the two of them go quiet, and a little later the girl is looking at her phone, saying she shouldn't have fallen for Xenos' plans, and in the end she just tormented her favorite character even more. At 7 o'clock the scene cuts to the karaoke place, with a bunch of students at the building entrance. Zambi shows up asking what was going on, and the bald guy says he has no idea either, but a girl from the other school had fainted at the entrance. Then her boyfriend is making a scene at the door, demanding to know who was responsible. An ambulance just arrived, and took her, but now he's causing trouble at someone else's gathering. Right after that the guy pushes everyone out of the way, and in the same instant he charges at Angie Wook. The poor guy, holding just a juice, gets thrown far away, and one of the students says it's a perfect display of the combined tactics of a delinquent group leader. The other girl, though, just tells everyone to get the hell out of there right now. A few minutes later, those two were in the elevator, heading up to the damn 50th floor. But then someone puts a hand on the elevator, and Angie Wook asks where they thought they were going. And obviously they weren't going to let him walk all over them that easily, right? The two of them watch everything in silence, and right after that the girl drop kicks Angie Wook. The poor guy couldn't take it anymore, and the woman tells him to go ahead, because she needs to make sure things are going to be clean around there. The elevator closes, and then the scene cuts back to outside the karaoke place. The Shiwa school group finally showed up, and the blonde girl says this isn't a game, asking how she's supposed to hit people with something like that. The students couldn't take any more people showing up, and the Mohawk guy's buddy says they're the ones who asked for this. And from now on, Shiwa school is definitely gonna dominate Bukijin school. The scene cuts back to Angie Wook, asking how they dared mess with Shunghee. A little before that happened, the ambulance had already arrived, and the boy says if anything happens to her, he'll hold everyone responsible. Right after that, Shunghee wakes up asking if he managed to reach his goal, but he says he doesn't care about that, in a situation like this, thinking the boss definitely needs to complete his mission. Then the scene cuts back to the present, with that girl saying this man is there in the middle of enemy territory because of his woman, and that's definitely something admirable. But the boss who took this guy down with a single hit is even more incredible, right? But apologizing, she says she's going to use him as a stepping stone to rise up and become a woman as extraordinary as her boss. On the other side, there in the karaoke room, that assassin had already been defeated. Choi asks what kind of punch that was, because he hit pretty hard. But the kid says that guy was already kind of dazed before, mentioning that when he landed the knee he saw his pupils go unfocused when he lost consciousness. And maybe the only thing he had left at that moment really was determination. Watching the situation, Choi thinks he definitely let his guard down, thinking he'd won. That idiot pushed off the wall, which was definitely something nobody expected. But at that same moment, that kid had protected Choi with a bag, asking if the guy had trained a lot, and he answers that fighting is his only hobby. The guy there is named Seweik, and Choi thinks his diligence reminds him of Kang from his past life. But at that very moment, he realizes he knew that kid's name naturally for some reason. At the same time he feels a headache, and Seweik notices the gaps between those pains are getting shorter and shorter. But even so, Choi says it's fine. At the same time he gets a call from Lee, asking how things are going at the karaoke place. Choi says it looks like everything's handled, and Lee says she really regrets not being able to see all that firsthand. Anyway, she got back the book that was stolen, and she also already knows who the brains behind this case was. It's probably not very interesting, and hearing that, Choi says of course he'd want to know who it is. After all, they're down 7 billion because of the dungeon operations, and they need to put Xenos to work immediately to pay off the debt. Hearing that, the girl immediately says that's the kind of line the protagonist would say, asking if he really is Choi Gang-jin. He says of course it's him, but at that same moment, Zambi disappears from the spot. Under him was Kiwi, who'd already been defeated, saying that guy is really strong, telling him to run away already, right now. Right after that, Lee says this fight is only going to end when they summon Xenos inside the game, asking him to meet her when the situation is settled. And Choi, going along with it, asks to meet at the playground where they used to play when they were kids. At the same time, a nervous Jason says she has to keep her promise. As soon as his account is restored, he won't have any reason to stay in this mess, and that's why he agreed to the book deal. Either way, he doesn't want to get involved with that red-haired guy ever again, so they're gonna end the business there. Back at the karaoke place, that man was looking around thinking that Assassin definitely wasn't gonna go down that easily, asking who the strongest one there is, and Choi, helping Kiwi, asks if he happens to be the street fighter called Zambidis. The one in front of him is named Seking, and he was the one who delivered the assassin's finishing blow. He heard he was looking for a strong fighter, but he's definitely never gonna beat that kid. Hearing that, the man goes quiet, thinking he can try to distract him, but obviously he's not gonna be fooled. Right after that, Seking asks how he dares mess with Kiwi, and on top of that, he reminds him of the fighter he hated the most, so of course he's never gonna forgive him. But at the same time, he thinks it doesn't really matter if he ends up getting defeated. Meanwhile, Choi takes advantage of the situation to grab the key bag and starts to leave, but of course he wasn't gonna get out that easily. And Zambidis says he knows he's actually the strongest one there. Right then, Seking tells him to take his hands off Kiwi's shoulder, trying to land a hit on the guy, but the guy dodges at the same time. He tries to hit the kid, but the dude unbelievably dodges too, managing to land a punch on Zambidis, but unfortunately it did nothing. Seking says everything's gonna be fine, so he needs to leave the rest to him and get out of there fast. Hearing that, Choi says he thought he was just some fight-obsessed fan, but he's got some guts, and honestly he's the best fit to take over the school. So from now on he's gonna be the main character of Chewa School. Man, up to now I still want to know where Kim is. Zambidis even tries to stop Choi from escaping, but there's no time to think, right? The other kid goes at him anyway. The kid literally threw a two-legged flying kick, and Zambidis can't believe he actually dared to use such a theatrical move. All that considering the weight difference, because there aren't many moves that would knock him down, right? The kid pulls himself together and then takes off his jacket, thinking it's worth trying this fight, so he's gonna use all the training and experience he's built up so far. The two stand there face to face and the guy, pissed as hell, says he's already dead. Then, right away, the fistfight starts. Now it's really gonna go down. Since he was a kid, he studied data and styles from countless fighters. He basically watched every fight league, analyzing all kinds of stuff after memorizing them. He ended up going through intense training. You might even ask why he'd go that far, but the answer is actually pretty simple. This is the formula he practiced, thousands of times against opponents like him. His strength probably isn't enough to beat him, but his goal is just to buy time, and just like he thought, the way that guy fights is identical to the fighter he trained for. If that's the case, he can't afford to block that attack, so he dodges the strike, trying to counter while backing up the high school students watching that ask who that kid was who was trying to go head-to-head with Zambetus. Then the man says he actually knows a thing or two, and Suk mentions a man named Zambetus, who has an incredible left to be honest. He doesn't know why a high schooler remembers him, but his movements match the data perfectly. This technique is an imitation of the one used by the fighter who forced Zambetus into retirement in a single match, and it's called the Jupiter Tiger Stance. After Zambetus went head-to-head with it, he ended up running away from the fighting world, wondering if he can really surpass that guy's technique in the middle of that fight. The two of them spoke different languages, so communication was impossible. But for Zambetus, even without communicating through his phone, what the kid had said could only mean one thing. So consumed by rage, he says he's definitely going to kill him back at the karaoke door. The guy with the mohawk says he's gonna finish everyone off as soon as the Just One security team shows up. The fun's over, but it doesn't look like that's what's gonna happen. Everyone left by car. The poor guy had no idea what had happened, while the other students were staring at him, and realizing that now only that little group over there was left. He immediately sees he's screwed.
So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.